All right, I think we're about ready. I think all my settings are adjusted properly, so welcome to your typical Tuesday night. Tuesdays are when elections typically happen in the United States, so it's appropriate that maybe we watch this on another Tuesday, even though this is we're in the middle of June rather than a November, which is when general elections typically happen in the U.S. So, in line with my current series of election night watch-alongs from years past, going back to 1960, we've done 1960, 1968, 1976. Well, tonight we're doing the one that some of you have asked for, and I decided to do it sooner rather than later, and mainly because I couldn't help myself, and I've already got all the footage pretty much pulled up. We will do 1980, which arguably is the last transformative election that we've had in the United States. Transformative in the sense that it brought a guy to power who was arguably the last transformative president. There's still some debate about, I think, Barack Obama and a lot of the influence that his presidency is going to have, but I don't think enough time has passed since his presidency yet to really judge. However, really since the 2000s and 2010s, it's pretty much been unarguable that Reagan was definitely an influential president who very much changed not only the politics of the country, but in many ways, like the culture of the country and how we kind of view ourselves. When I think of transformational presidents, they're really the types that only come maybe twice in a lifetime. To go back before Ronald Reagan, you could make an argument for maybe JFK, although, you know, he met a demise a little bit too soon. But before Reagan, the last definite transformative president would have been FDR. For better or for worse, regardless of what your opinion is, America was a much different country before FDR got elected in 1932, and it was a much different country after his presidency because of his legacy. The same thing really can be said about Ronald Reagan. America was just a different country before the 1980s. And people who kind of remember or lived through the 1980s, 1990s, and even 2000s, they will tell you, if they remember the time before Reagan, that yeah, America kind of fundamentally changed or shifted or rediscovered some of its roots. Reagan very much kind of brought the spunk back in American culture, politics, and the economy and everything, really, with his presidency. Part of it is just due to his, charisma. He was an actor, a sportscaster before that. So, a lot of people talk about, oh, well, Trump used to be host of The Apprentice and was a TV star before that. It's like, that's not new. Reagan came before him in those footsteps. Though Reagan was elected and served 2 terms as governor of California before he became president. So he did have some prior political experience to becoming president. But Reagan was a very, very transformative figure. The guy was just oozing with charisma, and basically, he could sell you a shit sandwich and make you think it was ice cream. I mean, even when I listen to his speeches and watch how he conducts himself on television, I can't help but feel like, man, I kind of want to vote for that guy. Even though a lot of what he did was, and I'm not taking like a political position one way or the other about him, a lot of what he did was controversial for both the left and the right in some sense, because we look at him from a perspective of what left and right and liberal and conservative and Democrat and Republican mean today, even though it's been 40 years since his presidency. So a lot, has changed since then. And we don't know exactly what kind of influence that Obama or even Donald Trump are going to have as far as the politics and the culture of the United States go long term. I don't know that either of them will be judged as transformational presidents even when their terms finish. It's easy to say that right now if you're for one or the other, but from a historical perspective, it takes about 20 or 30 years to like kind of marinate, and then people collectively realize after the fact whether you liked it or not, whether you're for them or you were against them. And so enough of my spiel about, Reagan as a president. I'll give you a little bit of background now before we go into election night coverage. So Carter got elected in 1976. He was coming to the end of his first term, and there were a lot of kind of bad things that happened during his presidency. It was still kind of like the era of political and economic malaise that started really in the 1970s under Richard Nixon. Not to say that Richard Nixon was at fault for that or not. I kind of think what happened in the 1970s was the result of a lot of bad policy decisions on the part of American politicians back then, and also maybe a lot of events overseas and around the world economy that we couldn't control. What do we mean by like bad policies and whatnot? Well, America had spent a lot of money and expended a lot of lives on the Vietnam War. And I'm not saying that it was a good thing or a bad thing in hindsight, because I wasn't alive during that time. But one thing that all that government spending did, and economists tend to agree on this, is it helped contribute to what we call stagflation in the 1970s, where we had relatively high rates of inflation, but no real growth in the economy, so to speak. And so a lot of different presidents during that era tried to deal with it. Nixon instituted price controls, I believe, sometime during his first term. Those turned out to be wildly unpopular. The 70s are also a decade that's associated with long lines for gas. There were several oil crises during the decade, thanks to, really in part due to political instability in the Middle East. Among different countries, not the least of which was the overthrowing of the Shah in Iran. Iran is really in the news today because of, are they opening, are they closing the strait? What is it going to do to oil prices? But Iran has kind of been in the news and has been influential simply because of what happened under Carter's presidency. And he kind of got blamed for that. And that's one of the reasons he went down in such a really decisive defeat in 1980. But I think what really touched Americans to a core about really a lot of the failures of the Carter presidency was the hostage crisis, where lots of Americans, I forget the exact number, were held hostage for I think more than a year during the end of his presidency. And that kind of really unnerves the American public at large, regardless of which side you're on. And it really hit home to a lot of people. And so what happened was Reagan kept campaigning on that, along with foreign policy blunders, and about getting the economy back up and going again and ending government regulation. He saw big government as the enemy. So when you hear conservatives these days or Republicans in the United States talk about the need to end big government, cut welfare, cut spending, lower taxes, it really all started and got underway full speed with Reagan's presidency, especially with his first term. I think he cut the top rate from 75% down to 25%. And I don't think it's been that low since. I think a few years ago, maybe in Trump's first term, the bill that I think Congress passed cut it down. I don't know if it cut the personal rate down. I know it did cut the corp rate down to a flat, I think, what was it, 17%. I could be wrong on that though, but that was the selling point of that was a lot of European countries had a flat corporate income tax, and the idea was to get America kind of in line with that, for better or for worse. We don't know how much that's affected the economy, because I think really what's happened with COVID has kind of thrown a wrench into every kind of economic prediction that's happened since then. Whether it's Trump passing the tax cuts or Obama with Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, whatever you want to call it, COVID has kind of like warped or masked a lot of the effects of major economic policies that happened in the 2000s and 2010s. But that's a subject for a different day. Everybody in the United States kind of has an opinion of Reagan. There are conservatives these days that are kind of on the political right that don't like him. And then you got a lot of liberals on the political left that look back and think, why can't conservatives or Republicans be sane like Ronald Reagan these days? But that just goes to show you just how much the parties and how much the political sides have changed in the last 40 years. But I'm going to get off my soapbox now, and we're going to go over election night coverage. Most of what I'll play, like I've done in previous bits of this series, is going to be from NBC. I will tune in a little bit to CBS and ABC, and if we have time and if I can find the right clips, we'll go over a little bit of 1984 as well, because 1984 was a landslide as big as 1972 between Nixon and McGovern. And so here we go. Let me go ahead and pause this. All right, here we go. Like I said, this is election night coverage. Typically begins, I think, at 6 p.m. Central Time. That's 7 p.m. Eastern. That's typically when the nightly news ends or was ending at this era. And so, without further ado, here we go. We're not going to play all 6 hours of the coverage because there is that much, but I'm going to play at least most of the first hour and 30 minutes because they make the call relatively early, and then I'll play bits and pieces after that when they call certain states afterwards, and then we'll dive into some of the other networks coverage as well. So hopefully it'll be a fun and interesting stream for all the political and historian or historic autists, history autists out there, myself included. All right, here we go.
Decision 80. NBC News reports the results of our national election. From the NBC News Election Center in New York, here are Tom Brokaw and John Chancellor.
Good evening and welcome to NBC News' coverage of the 1980 presidential election. Our team of correspondents, analysts, pollsters, and commentators is assembled here in New York and around the country to see if Jimmy Carter can win re-election or if Ronald Reagan will be going to the Oval Office. We have been polling around the country in the key states, NBC News and the Associated Press, and what we're learning in the key states is that makes us believe that Ronald Reagan will win a very substantial victory tonight. Very substantial. That's our belief as of the moment based on polls in key states. And we have 2 projected states in the presidential race which tend to support that view. In Florida, NBC News projects Ronald Reagan the winner of Florida's 17 electoral votes. And so we will put on our map in blue, for those of you who are watching in color, dark gray and black and white, we'll make Florida.
So obviously it's very important to note, besides the fact that there were still, 1980 was probably the last year there was a significant number of people watching on black and white television sets. And so John Chancellor kind of made that that subtitle about, you know, what the states are going to look like if you're watching in black and white. But I think by 1980, maybe 10 or 15% of Americans still had color television sets. Also, as with previous elections, although I think CBS and ABC had made the switch by then, NBC was still having the colors reversed from what we're used to. Blue was for Republicans, red was for Democrats, to kind of match what was going on and still goes on in the UK today, where blue is for the Tories and red is for Labour. And so we'll see that today. So all the blue states that you see are the ones that the Republican Ronald Reagan is going to win. And NBC stuck with this color scheme until, I think they did it through the 1992 presidential election. I think 1996 is when they finally flipped it. But just wanted to put that disclaimer out there in case you join, you know, in case you're confused.
Florida, our projected winner for Reagan. We have the electoral vote, therefore, given the fact that we had projected Indiana for Reagan earlier, is now 30 for Reagan, 2 states projected so far.
And of course, the amazing thing is this was 46 years ago, and in 1980, the electoral votes were divided based on what was in the 1970 census. And so Florida was worth 17 electoral votes, which is which today I think it's worth 30. And so this was one of the last elections where you just had a bunch of states that were worth 20 some odd electoral votes, but very few like below that amount until you get to like 11 or 12 electoral votes. And then New York and California were both worth over 40.
We have another southern state to project. Florida was carried by Carter 4 years ago. Mississippi was carried by Carter 4 years ago. But tonight, our projected winner in Mississippi is the Republican candidate, Ronald Reagan. And so, again, in blue, or dark gray and black and white sets, light gray, I'll get that straight this evening, light gray and blue, we move another 7 electoral votes into our projected.
So what have you asked about John Anderson? John Anderson is a kind of a third-party candidate who ran as an independent. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he ran in the Republican primary and dropped out after a few states in 1980. And Anderson was seen as kind of a member of the more representative of the more liberal wing of the Republican Party. I think he had his strongest showing in New England and the Pacific Northwest, in a lot of those states that had a lot of liberal Republicans. But he wound up winning, I think, somewhere around almost 10% of the popular vote. He didn't win any states, though. And it was kind of arguable at this time whether he was siphoning more votes from Republicans or more votes from Democrats for this election. Reagan did win a majority of the popular vote, though, in this election. I think he won about 51%, but his electoral landslide was much greater. Dr. Kombach, yeah, he did. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Column of electoral votes for Reagan, 37. 3 states projected for Ronald Reagan now. And we'd like you to meet some of the people who will be reporting this evening. Jessica Savage will be covering the races for governor in the House of Representatives. Garrick Utley will be covering the Senate races for us, Garrick. And Tom Brokaw and I will share the coverage of the presidential race. David Brinkley, who is recovering nicely from an operation, thank you, will provide commentary from time to time this evening. He's right over there. Well, Tom, it's turning out to be an interesting evening, perhaps more quickly than we had thought.
Well, the pattern that we have on the map already, I think, does show some ominous signs for Jimmy Carter. We have been talking throughout this campaign that he has to hold his political base, as all good politicians do. And there are 2 big chunks of it already tonight. Mississippi and Florida, both states that went for him 4 years ago. Tonight we're showing in the Ronald Reagan column according to our projections. That is not a good sign for Jimmy Carter, very plainly.
No, Jimmy Carter.
And so this is the election really that should, with the way the networks cover it, should look very familiar to everybody who watches election nights in politics today. You have the big map of red states and blue states. You have the television anchors at the anchor desk doing political analysis and all that. It took several election cycles since 1960, but they finally got it perfected. And you can tell it hasn't really changed that much, even though this was the era before like social media and smartphones and the internet. It's largely still like this today.
Had expected to lose Indiana. There had never been really any doubt about that. But the other 2 are quite serious losses. Tom, go on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, we have some popular vote that we want to show you as well. We'll be counting the electoral vote and the popular vote here tonight. Remember, in the electoral vote, the number is 270. That's what they want to reach. We have about 2% of the popular vote in from across the country. Most of that, 2% of the precincts reporting in so far. Most of that, as you might expect, from Indiana, Mississippi, Florida, those states that we have projected thus far. That is the eastern third of the country. And with that 2% of the precincts reporting in, Ronald Reagan with a pretty commanding lead that translates into 37 electoral votes, none for Carter thus far. Each state has an assigned number of electoral votes based on their representation in Congress. And that comes up to 535 altogether, and then there are 3 at large. So they need to get 270 to win before this night is out. It's a little simpler in the state and congressional races. There, it's just a straight vote. Whoever gets the most wins. And Garrick Utley is going to take a look at some of the Senate races.
Right, Tom. And the numbers are very simple in the Senate. 100 Senate seats. It takes 51 to control. As of now, in the current session, the Democrats have 59. The Republicans have 41. 41 seats. That means tonight the Republicans must pick up a net gain of 10 seats if they're going to gain control. We'll see whether they make it. There are 34 seats up this year. Now, one has already been filled. Senator Russell Long of Louisiana was re-elected. He's a Democrat in September. So tonight we're talking about 33 senatorial contests, and we already have some projections to make. NBC.
And so we'll watch some of the Senate projections. One thing that the 1980 election had and why it was so transformative, besides Reagan being elected president, was the Republicans took back the U.S. Senate for the first time in like over 30 years. They picked up a net gain of, I think, 10 senators. So they flipped 10 seats in the Senate. They also made gains in the House of Representatives, but the House was long dominated by Democrats from really the late 1950s through the Republican Revolution, as they call it, of 1994. 1994 was a Republican wave year, and ever since 1994, Republicans have held the House most of the time, except for, I think, the years that Nancy Pelosi was Speaker.
NBC News has projected that in Kentucky, the incumbent Senator Wendell Ford, a Democrat, has been re-elected, that he's going to defeat Mary Louise Faust, the Republican candidate, Ford going back to the Senate. And in Indiana, NBC News now projects that Representative Dan Quayle, Republican, will defeat the Democratic incumbent Senator Birch Bayh by a liberal.
If you're wondering why Dan Quayle's name sounds familiar, is that he was vice president under George H.W. Bush between 1988 and 1992. So he got his start here as a congressman.
Liberal Democrat, a major figure in the Senate. He was trying for his fourth term. Indiana has never elected a senator for 4 terms, so the jinx has worked against Birch Bayh. What is significant about that, though, is that there are a number of states where Democratic...
I think that fact about Indiana might still be true to this day, but somebody will have to look that up. And then there are certain states, especially southern states, they'll elect senators for like 5, 6, 7 terms. Kentucky.
Liberal senators face tough conservative challenges. What happened in Indiana may be a trend. Let's look at Iowa. We'll be watching the race there tonight, where Senator John Covert, liberal Democrat, is being challenged by Republican Representative Charles Grassley. Also, we'll be looking at Idaho, where Senator Frank Church,
who I think Chuck Grassley's still a senator from Iowa, the senior senator from Iowa, is he not? Somebody in the chat tell me.
Democrat, the head of the Foreign Relations Committee, is being challenged by Representative Stephen Sims. And in South Dakota, George McGovern, trying for re-election, the 1972 Democratic presidential candidate, challenged by Jim Abner. In all of these states, liberal Democratic senators in a very tight race. They're all too close to call, but they must be a bit worried because Birch Bayh has lost in Indiana. We'll be following these races as the results come in. Now let's go over to Jessica Savage and some of her returns.
We have one projection already. There are 13 gubernatorial races, and NBC News now projects, you heard a little bit earlier, in the state of Indiana, that Lieutenant Governor Robert Orr will be elected governor of Indiana, defeating his Democratic challenger John A. Hillenbrand. Again, NBC News projects Robert Orr, the winner in the gubernatorial race in Indiana, a 4-year term there. That was expected. The Republicans were expected to pick that up. The incumbent governor, Otis Bowen, was barred by state law from seeking another term, and the lieutenant governor's politics were very much in line with his bosses, and he's very popular, and so we project that he will be elected in that state. Now, as of a week ago, in some of our House races, the Republicans said they expected to pick up maybe 15 to 25 seats. Well, today, all the Republican Party officials I talked with told me that they have revised that, and they now expect a lot of the Reagan coattailing effect to come into play in many of the states, and they may pick up anywhere from 20 to 35 seats. Some of those seats they hope will belong to some of the Democratic leaders. 7 leaders have been targeted by the GOP, among them this year, House Majority Leader Jim Wright of Texas. He's in a very tough race in the 12th Congressional District. The Republicans conducted a survey in that district to come up with the best-known person to run against this 26-year House veteran. They settled on Jim Bradshaw, a Fort Worth City Councilman. I, however, talked with Wright a while ago, and he thinks that although it will be a close race, he may be able to turn it around. They're not as confident at the Democratic Party about the race that concerns John Bradamus of Indiana, the House Majority Whip. He was also targeted by the GOP. His opponent in the 3rd District there is John Hyler, who was helped by GOP money and also Political Action Committee money. Bradamus was hurt very much with high unemployment in that district. That could be a very close race, one the Republicans hope that they might be able to win. Another tough race, Al Ullman, head of the powerful House Ways and Means Committee in Oregon's 2nd Congressional District. He's having trouble recapturing the seat he's held for 24 years. His challenger, newspaperman Denny Smith, a Vietnam pilot, the son of former Oregon Governor Elmo Smith. If, as is now predicted by sources in the Republican and the Democratic Party, the Republicans do pick up maybe 25 seats, they will still be far short of the 218 needed to control the House of Representatives, but they will have a much firmer hold on the type of legislation that House comes up with. John?
Thank you, Jessica. Tom, looking at Florida, it seems to me that the president down there was damned if he did and damned if he didn't. The Cubans were mishandled in the perception of many of the people in Florida. The whole issue of the Cuban and Haitian refugees, and I do think I have read and been told that it's their perception of Floridians that he mishandled that may be hurting him badly tonight.
Bob Strauss told me just last week in Cleveland, as only Strauss can put it, I said, how's it going in Florida? He said, we got everything but the measles down there. Nothing has gone right for him so far. The thing to keep in mind about both Florida and Mississippi in terms of being Democratic states, they haven't gone with Democrats much in the last 20 years in presidential elections. Florida only twice, I think, since 1952. In Mississippi, they voted for Barry Goldwater in 1964. George Wallace got their vote when he was running in 1968. And Richard Nixon received their vote when he was running against George McGovern. So these are states that there are certain disappearing myths in American politics. One is that the South is a place where they're always going to go Democratic, because they're not always going to do that.
No, and as we see on our map tonight, you can see 2 states down there that are going Republican. We'll have more coverage of the 1980 election after this.
Plymouth, #1 brand of high-mileage American cars. The American way.
I don't know how many of these old school commercials you want to watch. Maybe the car commercials. This is a car channel.
The front-wheel drive Horizon Miser.
Last gas!
The front-wheel drive Champ.
Last gas!
And the front-wheel drive Reliant K, America's highest mileage 6-passenger car.
This is it! This is it! Last gas!
Plymouth, #1 in mileage. The American way to beat the pump.
The secret of the Colombian coffee bean was passed from the grandfather of Juan Valdez to the father of Juan Valdez, and then to Juan. For in Colombia, it is an art. It is a national heritage.
In modern elections anymore, it's not enough just to tell you who won, but why they won, and somehow how some of the issues may have cut across the lines.
So
Since
true.
the polls opened early this morning,
So
we've had
true.
people at voting places throughout the country asking voters what was on their minds on this critical election day. As the voters left their polling places, we asked them a series of questions that had to do with issues such as the holding of the hostages in Iran, the state of the economy, the character and the integrity of the candidates. In other words, the most important issues of the day, the issues on the minds of the voters. This NBC News Associated Press poll was carried out at almost 1,100 polling places across the country. By the time this night is over, we will have talked to 12,000 voters for our national poll, and then another 16,000 voters in key states around the country. One of the questions, not surprisingly, that we dealt with in the state polls was the hostage crisis, and whether the events of the past few days turned to be a plus or a minus for President Carter. He thought it was a minus, generally speaking. So far, we've asked approximately 1,400 voters in each of the 3 key battleground states, New York, Ohio, and Illinois, whether they approved of the president's handling of the Iranian hostage crisis. If he hoped that what happened over the weekend would boost his approval rating among voters, then the president was sorely disappointed. He guessed right. It was a negative for him. Only 27% of the voters we talked to in New York said they did approve. In Ohio, only slightly better, 31%. And in Illinois, 33% approved. The last NBC News Associated Press poll on this question, taken throughout the country 2 weeks ago, gave Mr. Carter an approval rating of 36%, and he simply didn't reach that in those 3 battleground states that we showed you just a moment ago. So clearly, last weekend's events, in terms of the hostages, cut against Mr. Carter with the American voting public, the people who went to the polls today. John?
And the people who went to the polls today and talked to our poll takers in the key states that a president or a candidate needs to win the election have told our poll takers from NBC News and the Associated Press they've given them information that makes us believe that a substantial victory will be awarded to Governor Reagan tonight in the balloting. A substantial victory. He's in California. John Anderson, the independent candidate, is at a hotel in Washington, and the president is at the White House. 3 reports now, the first one from Judy Woodruff at the White House.
The only way to describe the mood here at the White House, John, is just to say that it's very sad. No one is commenting on the record at this point, but aides who are working in the press office are wearing grim expressions. They're staying very quiet. Perhaps the best indicator was Jody Powell's teenage daughter, Emily, who I saw a few minutes ago with tears in her eyes. Reporters haven't seen the president since he flew back to Washington from Georgia earlier today, where he voted. But when he spoke to the townspeople in Plains this morning, almost 12 hours ago, Georgia.
And Florida indicates that Reagan is in good shape in the South, but a victory in Kentucky in this next hour might indicate a landslide across the Midwest. In about an hour, Reagan will leave his home and drive to a dinner with close friends. Later, he'll go to a hotel to watch the final returns, something that...
If that person sounds familiar, that's Chris Wallace, who after years with NBC jumped over to Fox News, and I don't know where he is right now, but he was most famous, I think, for running the Sunday program on Fox News.
People here are looking forward to. Now to Jim Cummins at Anderson headquarters in Washington.
Here at Anderson headquarters, the ballroom at the Hyatt Regency in Washington is just now beginning to fill up. We expect it to be full within the hour with volunteers for Anderson. There won't be much tension here tonight. His people, Anderson's people, had considered him out of the race a long time ago. During the campaign, it was said Anderson had trouble broadening his base, that his primary supporters were white, upper class or upper middle class liberal, the so-called wine and cheese set. Well, for the record, they've already brought out the cheese here tonight, and we expect the wine to arrive later. We are told that Congressman Anderson will come to the hotel within the hour and go right to his suite to watch the returns come in, and that he will come down here after the election is decided to make a statement to his supporters. Tom?
Thank you, Jim. No single night in America may have so many highs and lows as an election night, the winners and the losers. Jessica Savage is going to be keeping track of many of them, the House and the governors. Jessica?
And we have a projection here, Tom. NBC News now projects that Richard Snelling will be elected governor of Vermont. Snelling is running well ahead of his challenger, Democrat M. Jerome Diamond. He's the 3-term attorney general for this state. And then NBC News again projects that Richard Snelling will be the winner in the gubernatorial race in Vermont. This is one of the states that have 2-year terms, and by winning this race, rather Snelling will be the winner. And winning this race, Snelling now becomes the first Vermont governor to win a 3rd term in this century.
Thank you, Jessica. We'll have more coverage of the 1980 election after this.
Shake your noodle.
Shake, shake, shake your strudel.
Fascinating.
That's enough talk about my Timex quartz.
David Brinkley is here now with us, and Tom, I believe you've got another projection.
We have 2 more projections, actually. In the South, Jimmy Carter's home base, which is being broken up tonight by Ronald Reagan. We are projecting the state of Alabama for Ronald Reagan. Reagan wins in Alabama, 9 electoral votes, right next door to Jimmy Carter's home state of Georgia. And the state of Virginia, a state that Ronald Reagan, well, actually the Republicans won 4 years ago. We are projecting once again that Ronald Reagan will win Virginia. So we color those blue, as you can see in our map there. Blue if you have a color television set. I am told that it will be dark gray if you're watching in black and white. Reagan with 2 more important southern states to add to his electoral total. And there it is on our NBC map, as you can see it.
And we have one other projection to make. The votes are coming in from down there now. The polls are closed in several of those states. And NBC News has a projection that will not come as a surprise. We project in the state of Georgia, Jimmy Carter the winner of its 12 electoral votes. Jimmy Carter carried Georgia the last time by 66% of the vote. It's not surprising that he would carry his home state again, and that gives him 12 electoral votes on our electoral vote projection board. Reagan 58 to Carter's 12 electoral votes. Reagan in several states, Carter so far only in his home state of Georgia. What do you think about all that?
Well, I guess President Carter's got a color television set and is able to see these things without your light gray and the dark gray, but he can't be very happy about it. It's going very fast and very badly. And I think maybe before this is going to be wound up fairly soon, one way or the other.
Can I just correct one thing, by the way? I just like to get everything sorted out.
Don't tell me the president has a black and white television.
No, the grays are wrong. I've got them wrong. We've been told 3 different ways about the grays, for those of you who have black and white sets. Now, John, blue has been converted to light gray. It still is not a good sign. It doesn't change anything in terms of the election, of course, but for those of you watching in black and white, you may want to know where it all stands.
This is too early in the evening for trivia, but my advice to those of you in the audience with black and white sets is run out and get a color set. We'll never get this straight.
You can get good deals on them now.
Or call your friend who has one, as a matter of fact. Well, David,
this is the...
That's like if you in the 2010s telling people just go get a freaking HD TV, throw out your cathode ray CRT monitor or whatever, your TV. Of course, those are becoming valuable now.
Third time we've used the map, we've never got that straight. The light gray and the dark gray.
The South is really ripe Republican territory, is what that says. I mean, Richard Nixon did well down there before. Jimmy Carter was a kind of an aberration because he was a hometown boy 4 years ago. But this portends something for the Democrats for the future as well. They just, it's a revived GOP south of the Mason-Dixon line.
Well, I wonder if this might not mean that South Carolina would go to the Republicans.
You know, it was the South that elected Carter last time. The rest of the country voted pretty much as expected. The South turned itself all the way around and voted for Carter, whereas it had been going more and more Republican in the years prior to that. This time, if it goes back to where it had been before, it's really bad news for Carter, whatever color his television set. I want to ask Jessica something. Jessica, you don't have anything yet on Jay Rockefeller in West Virginia?
No, we don't have a projection on that
I am
yet.
worried about him. In the previous election, he gave his net financial worth at $19 million. A lot of money. Rockefeller, $19 million. He is spending this time $10 million.
10 he is.
Well, now what does that mean? One more election and he'll be broken on food stamps?
Well, I think what it means is one more election, he's going to hope to up the stakes by maybe looking at a vice presidential spot or maybe running for president. Maybe that's cheaper.
Well, at those prices, he'll still be broke. A Rockefeller on the food stamps would really be a milestone in this country.
They have bumper stickers down there. The opposition's running bumper stickers that says, make them spend it all, Jay.
It's the best thing for the West Virginia economy that they've had in a couple of years now.
Well, we're going to have to pause now, everybody. That's our coverage, and that's where the election stands at this time. We'll be back.
I want to switch over to CBS. Not that we'll watch a lot of their election coverage, but I just have this thing for like old school eye catches and graphics, and I think CBS among the networks in 1980 had the best like intro and music and the themes around the election. So just watch this just for a little bit.
From CBS News election headquarters in New York, here again is Walter Cronkite.
From 12 states now where the polls have closed in this presidential election this year, we have returns from many of them, and not in a single state is Jimmy Carter leading. Ronald Reagan is leading in all of them. The tabulated vote so far, with some 2% of the vote counted, Reagan has a 53 to 42% lead over Carter, with John Anderson at 4%. One state we have been able to say is definitely in the Reagan column here at CBS News, and that is the state of Indiana. There, Reagan won with a 57 to 38% margin, as you could see. For Indiana's 13 electoral votes, Anderson got 5% of the votes in Indiana. Indiana had an important Senate race tonight as well, and there, a long-time leader of the liberal Democrats in the United States Senate was ousted after 2 terms. Dan Quayle, the Republican candidate, defeated Birch Bayh 54 to 46% to keep Indiana's record clear of never having sent a senator back to the United States Senate for a 3rd term. In Indiana also, in the gubernatorial race, CBS News has an estimate there. The Republican candidate, Robert Orr, has defeated John Hillenbrand for that seat, which had been held by the Republicans for some time. In Kentucky, in the senatorial race there, CBS News estimate is, as expected, that Wendell Ford won handily over Mary Louise Faust, his Republican challenger. For more now on Southern results, here's Bob Sheeper.
Walter, about the only state where we have enough votes to really count them is in Kentucky, and the news in Kentucky, Walter, is not the vote that Ronald Reagan is piling up there. We might take a look at the board here. He does have a lead. The news is in the way Mr. Reagan is doing in this.
A Reagan electoral landslide, if not a popular
Skipping
one.
ahead just
on
a
the
little bit.
popular vote, with 7% in, it's still 51% for Reagan, 44% for Carter. CBS News coverage, the presidential election, and all the state races will continue in a moment.
Okay, so CBS was using the same theme as NBC, where Republican was blue and Democrat was red. They called a few different states than NBC at this time, though. This would have been like in the late 7 o'clock hour, I think. And ABC, I think, was doing red for Republican, though, by then. And then the other networks started switching.
Believe me, I can't tell them. Here at our CBS News election headquarters, our CBS News estimate is now that Jimmy Carter has won his first state tonight, and that is his home state of Georgia. CBS News estimate can say that he will get the 12 electoral votes in Georgia, which puts him into the electoral column for the first time tonight. However, thank you. CBS News election night coverage will continue in a moment.
Okay, we'll go back to NBC, but I just wanted y'all to see all of that.
Tonight's election coverage is brought to you in part by Comsat General Corporation, a Comsat company.
And this is a bit of like
on
the
this
local
election
news
night
coverage.
1980. We are going to be here with you at 22 and 52 minutes after the hour throughout the evening. Going to be bringing you up to date on all that's happening with reference to the local races in this area. We've got live cameras and News Center 4 reporters all over the place covering.
So back in this era, before like everything went online, the national networks, they would dedicate 10 minutes of time every hour to the local networks just to cover local races, things like city council, mayor, state representative, state senate, state level races. And so that's what this one is. I don't know, I want to say this was in Virginia or Maryland, one of the local NBC affiliates. So just to give you a little taste, we'll go ahead and watch just a little bit of this.
A lot of the campaign headquarters. In Virginia, the polls were to have closed at 7 o'clock. I suppose some of them have, but many of the polls in Virginia, polling places that is, are still open. And we are told that there are 200-300 people in line at some of those polls. NBC News has projected Ronald Reagan will be the winner in the Virginia contest. Out in Vegas, they're also predicting Reagan will be the winner in the country. They're saying it's 9-5. NBC's poll's a little more scientific than that, a bit anyhow. They do it on what they call an exit poll. That is, they ask people who they voted for as they're coming out of the polling places. And on the basis of that, we are told, or they figure, that Reagan will win. They don't tell us how many people say none of your business. There are probably a few of them, too. The polls in Maryland and the district will not close until 8 o'clock, and we'll be having reports from there also. In Virginia, there are two races that we're keeping a very close eye on. That is the 8th Congressional District and the 10th Congressional District. You're looking at them right there, Marty.
Jim, in the 8th Congressional District, Stan Paris and Herb Harris. Harris, the Democrat, the incumbent at this point, out to a rather substantial lead. If we can change over and have a look at the early numbers we have.
District has over 6,000 voters.
Bernard is manning a national desk. Stan is watching races throughout the country, the races of senators and congressmen.
22 and 52 after the hour. Join us. We'll be back in a few minutes.
X is for extra sexy. X is for extra dazzling. And now X is for extra body. Introducing brand new Flex X. Extra
Damn,
body
look at that
shampoo
hair.
with
We know
balsam
where
and
the
protein.
80s were coming.
Plus, an extra Revlon bodybuilder no other shampoo has. Feel the extra rich lather, the extra sexy body you get. X marks the spot. X marks the winner. X marks the newest Flex. Extra body shampoo and extra body conditioner, too, from Revlon. Extra beautiful.
News for Ronald Reagan of California on our election map, and a lot of bad news for Jimmy Carter, the president from Georgia. We have a state just coming in. NBC News now projecting that Ronald Reagan will win the state of Ohio, and it's 25 electoral votes. Reagan wins Ohio, a big key industrial state in the Midwest. Its 25 electoral votes go into his column. He'll add those to Indiana, Virginia, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, all colored blue on the NBC News election map. That means they go into Ronald Reagan's column, and that's a very impressive beginning for him on this evening. And no Republican has ever been elected president of the United States, by the way, without winning Ohio. Here's the electoral vote as it now stands. Ronald Reagan, 83, Jimmy Carter, 12. Carter's all come from his home state of Georgia. Needed to win 270 altogether. So it looks like a very substantial victory for Ronald Reagan, as we have been saying all evening here. For this evening is out, and it may be an early evening indeed for Ronald Reagan. It will be a long evening, however, for Jessica Savage, who is going to be counting the 435 House races and also taking a look at the governor's races around the country. And Garrett Utley keeping his eye on 33 Senate races for us tonight. Say nothing of John Chancellor, who is here taking a look at the vote as well.
To say nothing of David Brinkley.
And David Brinkley, who is going to be joining us from time to time. We're so delighted. He had surgery just a week ago. But tough old bird that he is, he insisted on being here tonight. We're delighted.
He'll take that tough old bird term up with you when he gets here.
I know he will.
Let's have a look at the national popular vote now. We have it in from a number of states, mainly those states in the South and the Southeast, but as far north as Ohio. And we see that with 2% of the precincts in around the country, that Reagan has a lead of less than 200,000 votes, but the important thing to look at is the percentage. 4% for Anderson, 42% for Carter, 53% for Reagan now, with the votes beginning to roll in from several states in the South, in the East, and one big, very important Midwestern state, Ohio. And looking at some individual state races that we're getting in here, we have projected Reagan the winner in the state of Indiana. You see a third of the precincts have reported, and he's got a very large lead, bigger than Gerald Ford did 4 years ago at the moment now, 57% for Reagan. And in Kentucky, we have results from there, 2/3 of the precincts reporting there, a 5-point solid lead for Reagan. Jimmy Carter won that state last time with 53% of the vote about. He's now got 46% of it coming in. It shouldn't go more than that. Garrett Utley. Birch Bayh is our projected loser in the state of Indiana.
He fits in the projected loser. Dan Quayle is the winner there. We projected that a few minutes ago. We have some other projections coming in, results coming in predominantly from the southern part of the country. First of all, in South Carolina, this is not really a surprise, but NBC News now can project that the incumbent Democratic Senator Ernest Hollings is headed for re-election, that he will defeat his Republican opponent, Marshall Mays. And in Georgia, Herman Talmadge. NBC News projects that Herman Talmadge will be reelected to a 5th Senate term. He's running with a good lead over Mac Mattingly, the former head of the Republican Party in the state of Georgia. Talmadge faced a very tough fight during the primary earlier this year. In fact, he had to face a runoff to get his party's nomination. He's also had problems because he
And so this was back when, even though the South had started trending Republican in presidential elections, they were still sending Democrats back to Congress and the United States Senate and even to governor's office. And Democrats still controlled a lot of the state legislatures in the South back then. Those didn't flip until the 2000s.
Was denounced, repudiated by his Senate colleagues for the misuse of office funds, but Herman Talmadge has lived again. We project him the winner in Georgia. And in the state of Ohio, which just a moment ago we projected for Ronald Reagan in the Senate race, we now project that Senator John Glenn, Democratic incumbent, will be reelected there, defeating.
So there's a slight lesson to be learned here. If you're an astronaut, just run for senator or for public office somewhere. You'll probably get elected. I mean, look at, who's that senator from Arizona? John Kelly? Yeah. I mean, he's an astronaut, right? So, yeah. Same thing with John Glenn here.
Republican candidate James Betts. So when you add it up already, we have projected 5 Senate seats, Senate races. The Republicans have made a net gain so far of 1. They have taken away the Democratic seat from Birch Bayh in Indiana. And that's where it stands right now with some other very close
is breaking our way, and we're very pleased about that.
Okay, thank you, Jim Baker. Now back to John Chancellor in New York.
Mr. Baker, like a lot of other politicians and journalists, have talked about an exit poll. That's the poll we've been referring to this evening, a poll made by NBC News and the Associated Press. Well, other organizations do it as well, talking to voters as they come out of the polling places. And we base some of our reporting this evening on that. Some call it an exit poll, others call it a voters poll. We'll be back with more after this.
Picking and choosing the right investments requires very careful handling. One wrong move can easily damage the best laid plans. At Merrill Lynch, we know that size and strength can be very valuable. But it is our sensitivity to your investment goals.
More efficient driving, like making fun trips, work trips on any of General's full line of radial tires that help save gas, Sunday or any other day. Quality, choice, price. General has a tire for you. Sooner or later, you'll own General's.
Smell that bacon. Nothing can penetrate this stuffy nose.
This can.
Hall's Mentholyptus?
With vapor action. Hall's vapor action penetrates deep into clogged nasal passages to help your...
This following analysis based on our polling in Ohio today. Ronald Reagan won Ohio, which Jimmy Carter carried by 11,000 votes 4 years ago, because the voters were most deeply concerned about inflation and also the maintenance of American strength abroad. And the voters in Ohio felt that Ronald Reagan could do something about both better than President Carter. So far, NBC News, Associated Press poll takers have talked to 1,500 Ohio voters as they left the polls, and the results on these issues now. Only 22% of the people concerned with inflation voted for the president, while 71% concerned with inflation cast their ballots for Ronald Reagan. Only 28% of the voters worried about U.S. strength abroad, then they voted for the president, but more than two-thirds, 68% of those worried about American strength abroad went for Reagan. Another striking result in Ohio, a heavily industrialized Midwest state which had been losing both industry and jobs, only 19% of those polled listed unemployment as one of the most important problems they face. But that's, with 9% unemployment, that's understandable. Carter and Mondale made an appearance on the last campaigning day of the campaign yesterday in Akron, Ohio. It did not work. Tom?
John, there's been a lot of talk about, in the course of this election, that someone may win an electoral victory, but not the popular vote here tonight. We're going to show you the popular vote right now and show you that Ronald Reagan is not only running ahead in the electoral vote, but he is running substantially ahead in the popular vote as well. 3% of the precincts reporting in nationwide. Ronald Reagan with a percentage lead of about 11 points now over President Jimmy Carter. Changes in the numbers, but not in the percentages, as you can see. John Anderson at 4%. That's an important figure, one that he'll be watching very carefully. He has to get 5% of the popular vote to qualify for federal election funds. And for every percentage point above that, he gets about another $700,000. So there will be a lot of cheering and straining going on at the Anderson headquarters tonight, not because they think he can win, but because they need the money to pay off the campaign debts. Someone who's been with us during this long campaign season is Theodore H. White, the author and historian, and he's right behind me right now with someone else who's been with us through it all, Bob Jameson, covering the Anderson campaign, tonight interviewing Teddy White. Gentlemen. We're back, and joining us now is David Brinkley, and framed behind him is the map that looks very encouraging for Ronald Reagan, looking more encouraging as the evening goes on, with Ohio added to Indiana, Virginia, as you can see, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida behind us. All of those important states in any election, but especially against Jimmy Carter, who had hoped to use the base that he's used in the past, the South. But Ohio was a big loss for him.
Well, you know, Tom and David, the electoral vote tally now is getting a little bit bigger. Reagan, Carter still has only the 12 electoral votes from Georgia, and Reagan has a little more than 30% of the electoral votes that he would need to get the magic 270. That's not bad for 10 minutes of 8 Eastern time.
You know, John, I was thinking, you and I spent a little time talking to Carter's mother, who said in the unlikely event that her son lost, she wanted him to come back to Plains and cut grass and clean up the yard. She may have him there.
Well, let me tell you what Helen Thomas of the UP reported tonight. She learned that the president was informed Monday night that samplings taken by pollster Pat Goodell showed it was all over, in those quotes, and the campaign manager Robert Strauss, this is according to the UPI, reportedly informed workers that the president had lost.
You had the feeling that he knew that this morning, or that he was in deep trouble when he made that emotional appearance in Plains. Talked once again about being proud to be a Southerner. Those are roots of which he is proud, occasionally even defensive. And the South, on either side of him at least, Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi, not with him, and we don't know about South Carolina yet. And yet, Democrats doing well in the South. Fritz Hollings, who's got an accent that's more Southern than a bowl of grits, it seems to me, is the epitome of the Southern senator. He'll be back. And who else do we call the governor of that state as well? Hunt will be elected.
Carter has never had a really proper Southern accent.
No, it's kind of the Herman Talmadge, Fritz Hollings have got the corner on that in Washington right now.
Carter never really had it. I think he's...
I honestly think, I mean, David Brinkley's actually originally from the South too. I think he's from North Carolina, but no, Jimmy Carter has kind of the Georgia version of like a Tidewater accent, because he's from like southern rural Georgia, and a lot of people like don't speak with that accent anymore. Those people are kind of like dying out, because ever since I would say the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, there's been a merging of southern accents throughout the southern United States, both in like the lowland South and the upland South as well.
Spent too much time outside the South or something.
Well, I'm amazed at the way things are going, if they are going the way we think they're going, and indicating, our polls indicating a substantial victory for Reagan. Who would have thought that Reagan could have, apparently what he's going to do tonight, he's going to do extremely well.
Well, but Reagan, the man, perhaps you'd have some doubt about that, but the Republican Party has been a revived party in the South. They've been working very hard at it down there. There's a new GOP political base that has been building there for some time now, right through Richard Nixon and along. In Alabama, they're given to saying these days the 3 M's are what's important: the military, motherhood, and the maker. And that all cuts very well for the Republican Party.
Well, the South has been going Republican for one race after another, until Jimmy Carter in '76 turned it around, as we were saying. And this time he has already lost some of it and may lose more. And it's bad news for him.
All right. In the next hour, we get the great big dump of votes from many of the big states, Illinois and Michigan and Missouri and New Jersey and all that. And that's where the election stands at this time.
This election night coverage is brought to you in part by Kicks Country and by the Moore Cadillac Company at Tyson's Corner in Virginia.
Decision 80. NBC News reports the results of our national election. Brought to you in part by Merrill Lynch, whose ability to guide you through the intricacies of investing makes them a breed apart. And by IBM, helping put information to work for people. From the NBC News Election Center in New York, here are John Chancellor and Tom Brokaw.
All right, are you all ready for you know that feeling that you get when you watch election night coverage and they call like one or two key states, and then that's when you know like everything, like the election's over. I mean, even though the guy has not technically won yet, it's kind of like in 2008, once they called Ohio for Obama, everybody knew it was fucking over. McCain was going to lose, and it's the same thing like in 2024. I think they called Georgia, then North Carolina, and then when they called Pennsylvania for Trump, like everybody kind of went to bed. It's like, yeah, it's over. Harris is not going to win. It's only a matter of time. Well, it's only 8 o'clock on the East Coast here, and things are about to. The wall is about the levee is going to burst. This is going to. I'll just play it for you.
And welcome to those of you who have just joined our coverage of this quite remarkable election, the 49th presidential election in the United States, and we are seeing every sign of a substantial victory for Ronald Reagan. We have already projected some states on our map for him, only Georgia so far projected for the president, and now with the polls having closed in a number of states and other key indicators have coming to us, we are going to project a number of states for Ronald Reagan, beginning with the state of Connecticut. Connecticut, with its 8 electoral votes, goes to Ronald Reagan. Our next projected victory for Ronald Reagan is New Jersey, with 17 electoral votes. New Jersey for Reagan. Going westward, we project Pennsylvania for Ronald Reagan. Pennsylvania, in his column, we project 27 electoral votes there. Further, Michigan, the state of Michigan, we project for Ronald Reagan 21 more electoral votes for his total. We go on. NBC News projects Illinois for Ronald Reagan. Illinois with its 26 electoral votes. Going further west, we project the state of North Dakota. No surprise there. He had been expected to take North Dakota's 3 electoral votes, and South Dakota, 4 electoral votes, which we project in the column for Ronald Reagan. Moving southward to Kansas. In the state of Kansas, we say Ronald Reagan is our projected winner. We also project Reagan the winner in the state of Missouri with 12 important electoral votes. Further into the border states, it is our projection that the state of Tennessee will be taken by Ronald Reagan, 10 electoral votes there. Going further south, the state of Oklahoma with 8 electoral votes, we project for Reagan. And finally, the big one, Texas, 26 electoral votes. We color blue or light gray, if you're watching in black and white, for Ronald Reagan. The map is turning blue for Reagan. Tom, can you tell us how many electoral votes that adds up to now?
I can right now. We're going to show you on your screens at home. Remember, the number that is needed, 270. Ronald Reagan already at 252. This reminder, that's what he has at this stage of the evening without his home state of California, where there are 45 electoral votes. That's still to report in.
And the 12 votes, electoral votes you see there, are all from one single state for Carter, his home state of Georgia.
Yeah, it's fucking over. I mean, all we got to do is just wait a few more minutes.
So far, we've been unable to project Carter a winner in any of the other states. Of course, he'll win some other states this evening, but the imbalance on the map behind us is as striking as I have ever seen it working in this studio at this hour of the night. That is remarkable. One state so far called for a sitting president of the United States, and as I say, the red states will be filling in on the map, but an awful lot of the big ones have gone to Ronald Reagan.
In an elementary way, what it means is that Jimmy Carter has been totally surrounded by Ronald Reagan. He has been isolated in his home state of Georgia, and that's where he stands. So, as we have been using our words carefully this evening, we have been saying it is going to be a substantial victory for Ronald Reagan. You can take it from there, taking a look at that map. The West, Ronald Reagan's very solid base still to report in this evening. We're going to be looking as well at some very close Senate races all night long, too. 33 of them altogether. Gary Cutler certainly will be covering him. Gary, what do you have?
Yes, Tom, first of all, let's recap the Senate races which we've been able to project so far tonight. First of all, in the Democratic column, the Democratic senators are doing pretty well, all in all. In Kentucky, NBC News has projected Wendell Ford, the Democratic incumbent, going back to the Senate. In South Carolina, Democrat Ernest Hollings returning to Washington. In Georgia, Herman Talmadge going back for a 5th term. And in Ohio, Senator John Glenn going back to the Senate for a 2nd term. On the Republican column, they have picked up a seat in Indiana. We project that Dan Quayle, U.S. Congressman from Fort Wayne, Indiana, will defeat Senator Birch Bayh. Birch Bayh has been in the Senate for 18 years. In a way, those who live by the campaign slogan die by the slogan. In 1962, Bayh defeated Homer Capehart, who had served 3 terms, saying
4% of the precincts around the country reporting in dozens of states now, and we see that Reagan is holding a 5. Now he's increased the lead since we looked the last time. A 6-point lead, 7-point lead over President Carter. John Anderson is still at 4% of the vote we have tallied so far. Quite a night, and more to come. We'll be back after this.
Rio. This one will fly the Atlantic. This one links Canada with Australia. This one flies New York to LA. The DC-10 proves itself in the air, 1 million miles a day. It's one of the world's most thoroughly tested airliners.
Ronald Reagan apparently headed for an enormous victory tonight. As we show you on our map, he is winning in all of the key areas, the industrial Midwest, parts of the Northeast, and the South as well. A big win for him, the state of Michigan, where both candidates spent a lot of time. And the single most important fact about the Reagan victory in Michigan is that he won everything in the state except the city of Detroit, where Mayor Coleman Young was working hard for President Jimmy Carter. Now, we talked to a lot of voters today as they came out of the polls, including voters in the state of Michigan, almost 1,200 of them altogether. Talked to people representing NBC News and Associated Press, and here's what they told us. Ronald Reagan won only 27% of the vote in Detroit, but in the suburbs, which are important in that state, he took 57% of the vote. And in the rest of the state, he won 55% of the vote. In the rest of the state as well, something unexpected happened. Carter and Reagan split the blue-collar vote, which normally, in Michigan especially, is heavily Democratic. This happened despite the intensive campaign on behalf of the president waged by the United Automobile Workers Union. In that union, Mr. Carter did pick up 60% of the vote, but that was not nearly enough to offset the gains of Ronald Reagan and the rest of the state of Michigan, so the 21 electoral votes from there go into the Reagan column, John.
We have another projection, and this time for President Carter. NBC News projects President Carter the winner in the District of Columbia. 3 electoral votes. The district has been voting since 1964, has never voted for a Republican presidential candidate. The president carried it last time with about 80% of the vote. A very high tally, but not unexpected. That brings the electoral standings to Carter 15, 12 from Georgia and 3 from the District of Columbia. Reagan all over, as Tom Brokaw said, the industrial East, the South, parts of the Middle West, the Dakotas, 252 electoral votes in the states marked in blue on your map, or light gray and black and white, and that's how it looks. Very early on this evening, it has been possible for NBC News to project all of that. We also have, in this election, a number of extremely interesting contests in terms of the Senate and the House. The number of the Senate Appropriations Committee chairman, the Senate Small Business chairman, the Senate Intelligence Committee chairman is up. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee chairman, Senator Church, is having a tough fight. The House Majority Leader, the House Whip, the chairman of the Ways and
as we possibly can. I think right now John has got some votes for us down south.
I do. First, let's have a look at the popular vote again, which is mounting around the country. Now you see we're over 1.5 million in each race, and Reagan's lead is holding at 7 points, sorry, with 4% of the precincts reporting. John Anderson's vote edging up there, but he's very far behind. Well, it just changed. Reagan's lead increased just a little bit there. These numbers, incidentally, that you see on your home screen are being fed to us by a computer, and so from time to time they will change while we're on the air.
The NBC report. I think it's too early to do anything but at least have your hopes up at this point.
Are you surprised by that at all?
Yes, because I've felt that it would be very, very close, and it still might well be. But I must say it's more encouraging to have these so-called exit polls speaking favorably.
With the findings going your way, apparently, in the polls, what do you think made the difference in the closing days of the campaign?
I think the debate clearly was a major turning point, and our inside tracking figures showed that since the debate, Governor Reagan was doing very, very well, and we followed it very carefully, and he continued to break those undecideds over. But again, it's awful early to really assess it until you know what actually happens.
And here's the call.
George Bush looking confident and with very good reason. Here's John Chancellor now with more news.
Well, the time has come. You've seen the map. We've looked at the figures, and NBC News now makes its projection for the presidency. Reagan is our projected winner. Ronald Wilson Reagan of California, a sports announcer, a film actor, a governor of California, is our projected winner at 8:15 Eastern Standard Time. On this election night, we have projected Ronald Reagan the winner. And to add evidence to that projection, we are projecting him as the winner in more states. By our calculations, Ronald Reagan is the winner in the state of New Hampshire, in the state of Vermont, Delaware, and South Carolina. We will be coloring in those on the map now in blue for Reagan, or light gray, black and white. New Hampshire is the first state that we are calling for him in this list of states. Vermont, we are coloring blue in a projection for Reagan. The state of Delaware, we are projecting for Reagan. And in the South, the state of South Carolina, we are projecting for Ronald Reagan. And that brings his electoral vote tally to the number required for victory. According to our projections, Ronald Reagan now has the required 270 electoral votes. Carter with 15 at this stage of the evening, 12 from Georgia, 3 from the District of Columbia. And Tom, that's our projection. It is a rather early call.
It certainly is 8:15 on election night. This race has been, the word we've been using all year, has been volatile, fluid, mercurial, whatever. But I don't think anyone anticipated that it would eventually become a floodgate of one kind or another, where the votes would just flood in for Ronald Reagan.
Tom, 4 years ago, we called the election for Jimmy Carter at 3:31 a.m.
I remember well.
And going back, talking about calls this early in the evening, I called for Richard Nixon in 1972, a little bit earlier than this, but this will go down as one of those nights when we are calling very early, and there's the evidence on the map. Reagan has, as Tom has pointed out, the western states still to come. And we saw little softness for him in most of those western states, some doubts about the ones in the Northwest, Oregon and Washington. California was leaning. We do not see, given what evidence we have now, that the president will be able to overtake Reagan at all, and certainly not in the West. And most of the big industrial states now, New York has not been projected yet, but most of those big states are in, and Reagan took them.
I can't, a personal note, I can't help but recall in 1966 riding around in a Greyhound bus with him, with Lynn Nofziger, as he was trying to win the Republican nomination for governor of California, and a lot of people were laughing at him then in 1966. And they have learned in every election in which he's been involved, never laugh at the chances of Ronald Reagan. He has always won by pretty substantial margins, except when he's run for president a couple of times in the Republican Party. But when he gets into a general election, he does extremely well.
He's now won the big one. David Brinkley will be along after this.
And so they've called it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward a bit to some of the other calls from this election. And I do want to maybe cover the 1984 election a little bit as well in some of those calls. So if the video seems jumpy, it's because I'm trying to find places where they're calling some key states. after they already called the election for Reagan.
All over the world, Wang is the leader in office.
Is going to terrify liberal members of the Senate. And with Reagan in the White House, a scared bunch of liberals, not as many as in the past, in the Congress, he's going to have his way. And so we're going to see a rightward movement in the direction of the U.S. government. I would say substantially so.
Yeah, he has talked about using it, as Theodore Roosevelt called it, the bully pulpit, and he's masterful at that, at using that kind of an office. We've seen him in one campaign after.
Tom Brokaw.
Hello once again, and just to bring you up to date, NBC News has projected that Republican Ronald Reagan will be elected President of the United States over President Jimmy Carter. Let us show you the map now and show you why we are able to make that projection. As you can see, blue for Ronald Reagan, and there's a good deal more of that than there is red for Jimmy Carter. In fact, Jimmy Carter only has his home state of Georgia and the District of Columbia. The rest of the map, as reporting in so far, belongs to Ronald Reagan, and that includes the key battleground states, as we were calling them, of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, all of those states that were going to be critical. That includes Texas as well. Ronald Reagan taking big chunks, knocking the props out from under Jimmy Carter's so-called southern base tonight. It's all over, as NBC News sees it, and at the White House they are acknowledging that as well. The aides in resignation, knowing that they have been beaten. And this is the electoral vote as we have it so far based on our projections. 270 needed to win. Ronald Reagan is right at that figure. Remember that the West still is to come in. That includes the 45 electoral votes out of his home state of California, where he is expected to do well. Jimmy Carter with only 15 electoral votes at this time. Ronald Reagan headed for a landslide victory tonight. But there are a good many other races as well, many of them in the Senate. And Garrick Utley has been keeping track of them. I think you have some projections for us in that area.
We have some projections, Tom. These are not real surprises. There are a number of big question marks hanging over a number of Democratic senators as to whether they'll survive the Reagan landslide, whether his coattails will be. Kinds of Democrats seeing the trend in Indiana and what is happening on that map back there must be very worried as to whether they're going to survive.
I would think so. And we're talking about the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Frank Church, out in Idaho, Warren Magnuson in the state of Washington, chairman of the Appropriations Committee.
One person who may take some comfort, surprisingly enough, is Barry Goldwater, Mr. Conservative, Arizona, up for re-election. The recent poll showed him in almost a dead heat against his Democratic opponent. If the Reagan tide continues and Reagan gets a big vote in Arizona, Barry.
We have another projection, this time for President Carter. NBC News projects President Carter the winner in the state of West Virginia. 6 electoral votes there, and no great surprise. And we will now fill in red or dark gray and black and white the state of West Virginia for the president. That means so far this evening we have projected him with 21 electoral votes. That's Georgia, West Virginia, and the District of Columbia. And Reagan, while the polls are still closed in most of the states in the West, is holding at the 270 electoral votes we project him to have. That's enough to win.
David, I would like to ask a question of you folks. We have here what I think reasonably could be called a landslide, or certainly something approaching a landslide. Where did it come from? Nobody anticipated it. No polls predicted it. No one saw it coming. How did that happen?
We may give you that answer in just a few moments, but I am told that while we think about it, we're going to go to a commercial, so we'll have the answer for you.
You got a minute.
Right after this.
Litton knows you want it simple. Who needs lessons with Litton's new AutoCook microwave oven? Litton knows your recipes. AutoCook knows how to cook my favorite foods automatically. Litton knows you want to cook with ease. It asks me what food, how much, how I like it done.
Ham that
AutoCook does the rest.
Put in the microwave. Oh my God!
You're buying everything we know.
Nobody knows more about microwave cooking than Litton.
Now, keep your eye on the ball.
That's a nice-looking watch.
Look at the ball.
I'll look at anything I want. That really is a nice dumb game of yours, dumb.
And I believe I have now formed an answer.
All right, let's have it. What is it?
Well, you'll recall that last summer that Ronald Reagan did have a very substantial lead at one point. It was post-convention euphoria for the 30%. Republicans. But that indicated at that time that a lot of people in this country were unhappy with what has happened in the last 4 years. Then he had his campaign gaffes. He finally got himself back on track. We always had that 35 to 40% of the people out there saying they were undecided, didn't know which way they wanted to go. And then Ronald Reagan began to say to them, I ask you this question, are you happier and more secure today than you were 4 years ago? And I believe that it is that question, simplistically, spread out across the country, that began to work very well for him in the closing days of the campaign. And then on debate night in Cleveland a week ago tonight, he proved not to be an ogre or a monster or a guy eager to drop bombs across the landscape. In the eyes of the public, those are the perceptions.
Yeah, that doesn't sound familiar at all, does it?
Well, I don't want to knock the polls because I believe in them and they generally do very good work. And in fact, they were right. They've been Harris today called Reagan, but didn't call it this big. And one thing I wondered, did a lot of people decide to vote for Reagan but didn't want to say so?
Well, that's always been a factor. They call that the ballot box factor in Ronald Reagan. Well, I don't want to confess he's an actor after all. A lot of people have made fun of him, and maybe I ought not be publicly in favor of him. I should say, in behalf of the NBC News Associated Press poll, that we took a lot of flack from the White House during the last several weeks or so because we would always show Reagan more substantially out in front than would other polls. And they would call and say, how can you have it that way? I think your poll is off base and so on. I finally said to Jody Powell last week, we'll show you the second half of it on Wednesday morning. Well, it turns out not to have taken all the way to Wednesday morning.
Well, again, I don't want to pick on the polls, but there was none of this in sight.
All right. Thank you very much, David Brinkley. And that's where the election stands at this time.
This election night coverage is brought.
I take it in stride. Put new kicks in your life with the new sound of Double Country. Get into our boots on Kicks Country, 106 FM, 73 AM.
Brought to you in part by Merrill Lynch, whose ability to guide you through the intricacies of investing makes them a breed apart. And by Dodge, with America's widest selection of front-wheel drive cars made for today's needs. From the NBC News Election Center in New York, here are Tom Brokaw and John Chancellor.
And if you are just joining us, NBC News about 45 minutes ago projected Ronald Reagan as the projected winner of the 1980 presidential election. We are projecting more states for him. We are projecting now for Ronald Reagan, and we'll fill them in on our map in blue. The state of Wisconsin, which went to Carter in 1976. Wisconsin we now show as going to Reagan in a projection. We also show Nebraska, which was Republican 4 years ago. 5 electoral votes. That's in the Reagan column. We project Reagan the winner in Wyoming. Republican 4 years ago. It's for Reagan tonight. And finally, Arizona. Arizona, which went for Jerry Ford in 1976, we project going for Reagan. That's a total in those 4 states of 22 electoral votes. And let's look at the electoral vote count now to see Carter with West Virginia, Georgia, and the District of Columbia, and Reagan with a number of states vote.
Yeah, Landon got 2 states that year.
That's right. And George McGovern in 72 carried Massachusetts and the District of Columbia.
Yeah.
It could end up that way. I don't know, but
especially when you have all that West still to fill in, and that's pretty good Ronald Reagan territory.
Well, let's look at the popular vote and see.
Okay, we'll show you where it stands right now in terms of the raw vote and the precincts that we have in. 12% of the precincts nationwide reporting in. Ronald Reagan, as you can see, with an 8 percentage point lead now over Jimmy Carter. John Anderson at the 5% level. That's important to him because at 5% he qualifies for federal funds, almost $4 million worth, and for every extra percentage point.
The American way to beat the pump. Now, Zenith System 3 is more. The PRP circuit. For more picture detail. More picture sharpness. 25% more. 4 speakers for more sound.
built-in cable tuning for access to more channels. 105 channels. Zenith System 3. We're moving television into the future.
How would you like to buy a new Rolls-Royce for $67? Or a new suit for 50 cents? Or a steak dinner for a nickel? Well, you could, if in the past 25 years their costs had dropped as much as the cost of doing work on an IBM computer, helping people do more at less cost. That's productivity, and that's one answer to inflation. IBM, helping put information to work for people.
We're back, and one of the reasons that Jimmy Carter is not doing well tonight, if you're just joining us, we should tell you, I guess, that NBC News about an hour ago projected that Ronald Reagan will be elected president, and by substantial margins. One of the reasons that Jimmy Carter is not doing well is that inflation hurt him a great deal. The NBC News Associated Press survey of voters at more than 400 polling places across the country today showed, you guessed it, inflation, the #1 problem on the minds of almost all voters. Almost half of today's voters said they think that a president is able to do something.
And I must say,
that's a remarkable difference. Inflation, the key issue in the...
So all a president really has to do to cut inflation is basically appoint a new Federal Reserve chairman who will then raise interest rates enough to where they will stop inflation dead in its tracks, but they'll probably kill the economy too at the same time. And that's what happened when Reagan became president. Paul Volcker Paul Volcker raised interest rates to, I think, like 25% or some obscene amount, and it stopped inflation dead in its tracks. The 70s inflation was over, but it caused a major recession in 1983, where we saw, I think, 10% unemployment. But then what happened was the so-called Reaganomics, the tax cuts from 81 and 82 finally kicked in, and the effects hit the economy, and inflation and unemployment went down significantly in time before Reagan got reelected in 84.
This election, it's running at just over 12%. There were some tough figures for the...
That's also why, like, Trump is trying to get rid of Jerome Powell. He's taken a page from this playbook in the early 80s.
President in the closing days of the campaign. As we say, half the people believing the president can control it, and of that half, about 71% saying they're going to vote for Ronald Reagan, and indeed they did.
Race. There are two races that we're looking at. We'll look at further races in the House of Representatives coming on later in this evening. Tom.
Thank you, Jessica. We are going to give Jimmy Carter another state. He does not have many tonight. NBC News now projecting that Jimmy Carter will win the state of Rhode Island and its 4 electoral votes. Jimmy Carter winning Rhode Island and the 4 electoral votes. So on our map, we will add now in the upper right-hand corner the tiny state of Rhode Island. That will be colored red for Jimmy Carter. Not much red up there, as you can see. An overwhelming Ronald Reagan victory that we are projecting tonight. Rhode Island had been expected to go to the Democrats, and indeed we are projecting that it will. So let's take a look now at the electoral vote as it now stands. Ronald Reagan, 295 electoral votes. Jimmy Carter, just 25. His home state of Georgia, the Democratic state of West Virginia, Rhode Island, and the District of Columbia. And that's all he has at this point. Earlier this evening, he was told by his own pollster, Pat Caddell, it's all over. The top President Carter campaign officials were saying the same thing. They acknowledged it early on, and now that's the consensus. Ronald Reagan, the projected winner of the presidential race. And where shall we go from here? All right, we'll be back with more of Election 1980 right after this.
We're Exxon. We're Bob Larkins, whose department is ready to...
Here are Tom Brokaw and John Chancellor.
According to UPI, the president knew this morning that he was probably going to lose the election. His pollster, Patrick Caddell, told him that, gave him figures this morning showing him he was trailing Reagan nationally by 8 percentage points. And interestingly, that Caddell poll is being borne out by the popular vote figures that we've seen here tonight. It may end up being more than 8 points, but that's what the president was informed of this morning by his very accurate pollster. We are going to project some more states for Ronald Ronald Reagan now. NBC News projects Ronald Reagan the winner in the border state of Kentucky with its 9 electoral votes. And that's a solid block ranging all the way from the...
And once again, John Chancellor uses the old school meaning for border state, meaning states that kind of straddle the northern and the southern United States. So Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, Missouri, those are so-called quote-unquote border states from back then.
From the Gulf of Mexico to the Lake Michigan. We are also in the West projecting Reagan the winner in the state of New Mexico with 4 electoral votes. New Mexico, Reagan our projected winner. You can see him filling in the West with the states in blue, which we have marked on our map for Ronald Reagan. A lot of blue on the map. The electoral tally for Reagan by our projections is now over 308. Carter still at 25. That is one of the largest imbalances we have seen here.
Filled in for Ronald Reagan, but let us show you what's happening in some of the key states. In Ohio, with 25 electoral votes, 1/5 of the precincts reporting so far. Ronald Reagan with a popular vote lead now.
Defeated Birch Bayh, the incumbent. That's a gain for the Republicans. In Kansas, there is Robert Dole, Republican going back. In Maryland, Charles Mathias. And in North Dakota, freshman Senator Mark Andrews holding the Republican seat there. And a new projection we can make now in the state of Oklahoma. NBC News now projects that Don Nichols, Republican, 31 years old only, will be the winner in Oklahoma, holding that Senate seat for the Republicans, defeating the Democratic candidate Andy Coe. Of Jim Abner of South Dakota, McGovern, after 3 terms in the U.S. Senate, defeated. And in Alabama, a second projection, a second surprise. Jeremiah Denton, Republican candidate, former prisoner of war, projected by us as the winner in Alabama against Jim Folsom Jr., the first time Alabama will have a Republican senator in 101 years.
And so I think here's Carter's concession speech.
I promised you 4 years ago that I would never lie to you, so I can't stand here tonight and say it doesn't hurt. The people of the United States have made their choice, and of course I accept that decision, but I have to admit, not with the same enthusiasm that I accepted the decision 4 years ago. I might say I have a deep appreciation of the system, however, that lets people make the free choice about who will lead them for the next 4 years. About an hour ago, I called Governor Reagan in California, and I told him that I congratulated him for a fine victory. I look forward to working closely with him during the next few weeks. We'll have a very fine transition period. I told him I wanted the best one in history. And I then sent him this telegram, and I'll read it to you. It's now apparent that the American people have chosen you as the next president. I congratulate you and pledge to you our fullest support and cooperation in bringing about an orderly transition of government in the weeks ahead.
Well, the Vice President, in his speech, he said the people quietly wielded their awesome power. And they're still wielding that awesome power according to our projections. We are projecting now 5 more states for Ronald Reagan. And let's look at the map and we'll show you what they are. 7 electoral votes we project for Reagan in the state of Colorado. 3 electoral votes we project for Reagan in the state of Nevada. No surprise there. In Idaho, again, a state that had been expected to go for Reagan, 4 electoral votes, our projected winner there. We make him our projected winner in Utah and our projected winner in Montana. And that leaves only the Pacific Coast states there. It leaves Minnesota undecided and Iowa undecided, as you see, Arkansas and Louisiana, North Carolina, New York, and Maine. We're getting down, I believe Maryland is still undecided, and that brings our projected electoral vote total to Reagan 330, Carter 25. Excuse me, that's one of the biggest differences we have ever seen. David, I guess we'd have to look in the record books for that.
I think you would have to go back to the Nixon-McGovern, when McGovern carried Massachusetts, period. That was all.
And the District of Columbia.
And the D.C.
Yep.
But of the states, he carried one. So I thought it was a fitting farewell, well-spoken, very gracious. Didn't you?
I have one little, I made the clangor tonight.
What was it?
Well, the clangor was when I said that no sitting president had been defeated since Herbert Hoover, and Garrick immediately jumped in and said, what about Gerald R. Ford?
You left out the word elected.
I know, but I'm not going to take refuge in that. Ford was the last president who was defeated while in office, but I agree. It's 10 electoral votes, which will be added to his total. And on our map, you'll be able to see Arkansas, the only holdout in there. Louisiana, our projected state for Reagan. And that...
Liberal Democratic senators in deep trouble. In Indiana, Birch Bayh was defeated after 3 terms in the Senate. Now John Culver. And there are other liberal senators, such as Gary Hart, who is trailing in Colorado, and Frank...
Alma mater in my native state of Illinois. I quoted a line from H.G. Wells.
This is John Anderson's concession speech.
That an election should be the celebration of democracy. Now, your response tonight, I think, indicates that this is a celebration.
Fine, okay.
And you know, there are so many people whom I should thank tonight, and my heart is full of the gratitude that I feel for all of the efforts that these many thousands and thousands of people have made. But I certainly want to ask my own family to come for just a moment and stand beside me again. My wife Kiki, that perhaps if you don't let me finish this speech,
damaging to the president. And as expected, the key issue influencing today's voters was inflation. The NBC News AP survey of voters, and we took this survey at more than 400 polling places. The Conservative Political Action Committee was helping whatever coattails there may have been. I don't see the difference. You see, Reagan is now leading Carter 50% to 43% of the vote. And I'm not certain in my own mind that that is pulling a lot of people in. We will know later. But right now, I don't want to make that assumption.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just...
No, I understand. I think that that's what we were talking about earlier, about the difference between a popular vote and electoral vote, among other things. But the fact is that in those states that we have been talking about tonight, there certainly is a hardening of the conservative attitudes out west in Idaho, in Iowa, in South Dakota. Where else?
Perhaps in New York State. Alphonse D'Amato, the conservative Republican candidate there.
Not even little known, unheard of about a year ago.
Absolutely
just a
right.
Long Island Township supervisor.
Of Hampstead. I've never been sure how much...
And so they filled in more states. They called Minnesota for Carter, and it looks like they called Iowa for Reagan.
How much of a coattail, shirt-tail force there was anyway. In this case, a great number, several in any case, liberal Democratic senators have been defeated by Republicans. How much did Reagan have to do with that? Who knows, or will ever know.
Well, could I just add that it seems to me there may be a case for less coattail effect now, because Culver, Bai, McGovern, and Church all spent a lot of money on their own advertising campaigns. They're highly visible. They've got media experts helping them. And it isn't just, well, because I want to vote for President Roosevelt, I'll vote the straight Democratic line and I'll vote for Senator whatever his name is. I think these are highly individualized races now.
And these people are well known in their states. Culver is a famous figure in Iowa.
Certainly.
And people would vote for him or against him on the basis of their thoughts about him, I think.
And about the country, David, as you pointed out.
Yes.
So it's going to be a conservative Senate, which means it's going, and with a Reagan in the White House, it's going to be a conservative U.S. government.
All right, we're going to call another state for Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
Not surprisingly, it's a big one. It's his home state, California, 45 electoral votes. Ronald Reagan picks up his home state of California. He has never lost a race there. And we fill in that big chunk of the map, once again with blue, now solid blue practically, all the way from the Mississippi River westward, leaving only Oregon, Washington, and Arkansas, as you can see.
Beginning to look like a suburban swimming pool over there.
Well, and even in the East,
Sherman Oaks, I'd say, probably.
Even in the East, Reagan is ahead of New York. Well, go ahead and have a look at this.
We just want to show you the electoral vote. Ronald Reagan pushing hard at 400 electoral votes. No one was saying that just a couple of days ago. Jimmy Carter stuck on 35. There are fewer and fewer states to come in. Ronald Reagan, as we said early in the evening, locking up a big chunk of Jimmy Carter territory, or what was thought to be Jimmy Carter territory. The lead now is just overwhelming. It's almost beyond description at this point. No one expected that map to fill in quite that way until the closing hours, I think, of this election.
You know, on the map, we still have New York undecided, uncalled, unprojected. 46% of the precincts are in New York, and Ronald Reagan is ahead a little bit. He's even with Carter in the state of Maine. He's a little bit ahead in Maryland. That's still too close for us to make projections, and even in North Carolina. So even those states, he could fill in the map there, isolating Carter in Georgia and West Virginia in the South.
If we can get back to this point about coattails, shirt tails, or the absence of them, maybe the best way to describe it is that there was just a real feeling in the country that it was time for states that we have filled in for Jimmy Carter. It's an overwhelming electoral victory for Ronald Reagan, former governor of California, 69-year-old Republican challenger to the Democratic incumbent, Jimmy Carter, who will have served just one term. Well, that's where it stands in terms of the geography. Here's how it figures in terms of the numbers. 270 electoral votes needed to win. Ronald Reagan is more than 100 votes past that point at 390.
NBC News projects in the state of Maryland that Jimmy Carter will be the winner of Maryland's electoral votes. And so we will move that into the red or dark gray in Maryland on our map. And then all the way on the other side of the country, in the state of Washington, which Gerald Ford won in a squeaker in 1976, we will project that for Ronald Reagan. And there's Washington, leaving us with 8 undecided states, including, as you see on your map, Hawaii and Alaska. So the electoral vote total now brings Reagan over the 400 mark and brings Carter to 45 electoral votes. Garrick?
We have a projection in California in the Senate contest. NBC News now projects that the Democratic incumbent Alan Cranston, Reagan's original political campaigns, but Alan Cranston reelected in California. Let's look at some other major Senate races. One liberal ticket here because he's out in New York State, almost in holding a 68% of the precincts reporting he is beating Robert Caston.
He has such control over the federal faucet that he just turned down the money.
$951 million he turned down in terms of federal aid, disaster relief.
Almost $1 billion, and as one of his opponents said, every time that mountain goes off, we lose a little bit. Heidi Schulman in California was in the room when Ronald Reagan was making a congratulatory call and receiving one as well to Dixon, Illinois. Heidi?
Expecting Ronald Reagan here in the Century Plaza Ballroom in just about 15 minutes, but as you did see a few minutes ago, he is in his hotel suite on the 19th floor here. He's been making phone calls around the country to people like Paul Laxalt, who was his campaign chairman, Jim Rhodes, the governor of Ohio, who was a key...
Yes, we were talking about it just a moment ago, Tom. In the state of Washington, NBC News now projects that the incumbent Senator Warren Magnuson has been defeated. The winner there, Republican Slade Gordon, Magnuson, who has been in the Senate now for 5 terms. He's the dean of the Democrats there, one of the most powerful figures. He was the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. He is going down to defeat. That means the Republicans so far this evening have picked up 6 Democratic seats. Of course, they needed 10 to win a majority, and they're only 4 away from that right now, and there are another number of races still outstanding. But Slade Gorton, Washington, has defeated Warren Magnuson, and obviously it wasn't just the Ronald Reagan trend in Washington, there's also the age factor worked in there. Magnuson has been ailing a bit. He is 75. Slade Gorton never said that Magnuson was too old. You don't do that in politics. You go out and you jog a lot, you run a lot, and you say you have lots of energy. That's what he does.
Magnuson would say the meetings don't start until I get there, but it did him very little good, it turns out, in this race. We'll be back with more of Election 1980 right after this.
Makes your feet feel good.
The Foot Fixer.
In fighting even problem dandruff.
I give it a tryout.
Up now, NBC News is going to project the state of New York. We say that our projected winner is Ronald Reagan in the 41 electoral votes of New York State. And there it is, going in the blue on your map. Carter has 4 states now in the District of Columbia. The electoral vote tally, Tom, Reagan is getting up to those very big tallies that we were talking about a few minutes ago, almost 450, 10 times the electoral margin of President Carter.
Well, let me add some more to Ronald Reagan's total if I can. We are now projecting that Ronald Reagan will win the state of Oregon. So on our map now, we will color in the state of Oregon blue, 6 electoral votes to the summary for Ronald Reagan. And as you look at the map, it is more than a swimming pool, David. It is now a full-size blue lake for Ronald Reagan all the way across the country, with just 1 or 2 red exceptions as we show it on the NBC map. Red for Jimmy Carter, of course. There's the electoral vote. Have we added the 6 from Oregon? 449 is the total?
Yeah, right.
Okay, 449 is the total for Ronald Reagan. Jimmy Carter, 45. Ronald Reagan made a lot of Democrats unhappy this year when he talked about FDR, who was one of his early political heroes. In 1940, we always think of FDR rolling up big totals. In 1940, he won 449 electoral votes. And there's a good possibility, of course, that tonight Ronald Reagan, running against Jimmy Carter, may exceed even that FDR total against Wendell Willkie.
2 or 3 states left to be called for you guys. There's a tremendous landslide. Unanticipated, unexpected, unpredicted. No one predicted this. If so, I didn't hear it. Did any of you?
We had a number just a few moments ago looking at our voter poll, as we choose to call them, the people who were leaving the voting place. 25% of the people that we talked to said they made up their minds in the last week of this campaign. About half had made up their minds earlier in the year, but it appears that from the point of the debate on to the weekend, people were making up their minds left and right, so to speak. Mostly right.
Well, as Carter's manager, Bob Strauss,
politically speaking,
he said that was a confluence of negative factors that hit us after the debate. They did not, some of them didn't want to go into the debate. They were doing reasonably well before the debate. The country's perception was that Ronald Reagan won the debate, and I'll bet if you read the text of the debate and had not seen it on television, Carter probably would have won it on points. But the country believed that, and then the hostage thing came in a sneaky way, and it just collapsed for Carter.
David,
all of this arrived on top of inflation, unemployment, and so on, all of the problems we know about.
You've seen an awful lot of change in Washington through the years. How do you think this will affect the Capitol and how it behaves and performs?
I think it is going to bring profound changes. Partly because when Carter won 4 years ago, there was no particular change in Congress. Now, we still don't know if the Republicans will get control of the Senate, but they will effectively have.
Okay, that's going to do it for 1980, but stay tuned because I am going to show a little bit of 1984 after we go over this map just a bit. So there weren't any more states called in 1980 after this. A lot of them were just too close to call, or they had quit counting their votes, but this is what the electoral map wound up looking like eventually. So when it was all said and done the next day, Carter won only 6 states in the District of Columbia. He won Georgia, Minnesota, which was Walter Mondale's home state, his vice president. West Virginia, which was reliably Democratic back then. I think the only time it had voted Republican. up until 1984 was Nixon's landslide in 1972. He picked up West Virginia. I think West Virginia may have voted for Eisenhower once or twice. I don't remember, but West Virginia was one of the most democratic states in the Union back then. And he won, okay, Carter won Maryland, and he won Rhode Island and Hawaii. So that's basically 6 states. Reagan won the other 44, as you can see, including New York and California. And so it's easy to look at this map and see why it was called at 8:15 Eastern Standard Time. We don't get early calls like that anymore because nobody wins in landslides like this anymore. But yeah, Reagan was flirting with 500 electoral votes as a first election president. Usually, even back then, if somebody won more than 400 electoral votes, it was as an incumbent running for re-election. And so this was just a substantial, I mean substantial change. And really he did have a mandate because of this election and this result. Even the Democratic House was kind of willing to compromise and bend to his will on a lot of the tax cuts. So Reagan had a good working relationship with then House Speaker Tip O'Neill to get all that passed. So I think 6 states, I think, Hawaii, Georgia, West Virginia, Maryland, that's 4, Minnesota's 5, and Rhode Island is 6. And DC's not a state, but that's where 3 electoral votes. So yeah, and Reagan won the other 44. Okay, let's go, let me pull up some coverage of 1984. Let's see if I can find it. I'm going to see if I can find the call for 1984. I don't think this video has it, but here we go. 4 years later, running for re-election.
Decision 84 election night continues. Sponsored by Manufacturers Hanover, the financial source worldwide. By the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. And by AT&T, we're reaching out in new directions. Now from the NBC News Election Center in New York, here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening, everyone. It is now 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and a number of key states have closed their polls just in the last couple of minutes. Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, Missouri, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Texas, Oklahoma, and of course many other states, especially in the
You can see from this map, Georgia and West Virginia already flipped to Reagan from 80 to 84.
West still have their polls open, but if the current trend continues, and there is every expectation that it will, this is going to be perhaps an historic night for Ronald Reagan because he is running a very strong race at this point. He is winning all of the states that he had to win in the South and in the Midwest, and the indications are that this could be a very big night for Ronald Reagan. We want to add 2 more states right now to Ronald Reagan's column. The state of New Hampshire, 4 electoral votes there. New Hampshire really beat up on Mondale twice this year. Gary Hart won the primary, and now Ronald Reagan wins in the general election. And also in the Great Plains, the state of Kansas. Color the state of Kansas blue with its 7 electoral votes for Ronald Reagan. Lyndon Johnson is the only Democrat to win Kansas since 1936. Ronald Reagan keeps the streak going tonight. And another big industrial Midwestern state, Ronald Reagan, the winner in the state of Michigan with its 20 electoral votes. Again, a state with severe economic difficulties during the past 4 years of the Reagan administration, but tonight it awards its electoral votes to Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan has won all of the states that we have been able to project up to this point, and as you can see, the map now is beginning to fill in. Blue for Ronald Reagan. When Walter Mondale wins a state, those states will be colored red. In the industrial Northeast, another key win for Ronald Reagan. NBC News now able to project the state of New Jersey for Ronald Reagan, 16 electoral votes there. The Democrats had hoped that the blue-collar vote in New Jersey, and especially the addition of an Italian Catholic on the ticket, Geraldine Ferraro, would help them in New Jersey, but apparently it has not. Another key win, 16 electoral votes out of New Jersey for Ronald Reagan. 270 electoral votes are required. Ronald Reagan is marching steadily toward that number, and it seems toward a much higher number. 166 he has added up at this hour, 8 p.m. in the East. So far, no states that we have been able to call for Walter Mondale. 3% of the precincts have reported in nationwide. We're beginning now to see some votes, and as you can see, the lead that President Reagan and Vice President Bush have over Walter Mondale and Geraldine Ferraro is overwhelming at this time. That's a 24-point lead at this hour. That, of course, could change. We do want to take this opportunity to remind you that NBC News projects only after most, or if not all of the states have all the polls in the Canadian border. The state of North Dakota, with farm difficulty in the farm economy out there, still the winner, Ronald, this campaign that Jesse Jackson would make the difference, especially in the South, which has been solid Republican territory in presidential elections. Well, look what happened tonight in one of the big southern states, the state of Texas. NBC News now projecting Ronald Reagan, the winner in Texas. 29 electoral votes. That's blue on our map. A Democratic governor down there. They split their Senate seats, but Ronald Reagan gets their presidential votes in the state of Texas. Tonight, 198 electoral votes for Ronald Reagan, now less than 100 away from the magic number of 270 that he requires to win. Let me show you now how the vote is shaping up in the South. It is a blowout for Ronald Reagan down there. The Democratic candidate for President of the United States, 3 electoral votes.
It's the consolation prize for Democrats.
Columbia is colored red now on our national map for Walter Mondale. He gets on the board. The Electoral College total, however, is very much against him at this hour. We'll show that to you right now. Walter Mondale has just 3 electoral votes. And look at President Reagan. President Reagan with 223 driving toward.
Because tonight he defeated the Democratic
Here are some interesting Senate races, by the way.
The Republican incumbent Gordon Humphrey, the projected winner, defeating Democrat Norman Demours. Humphrey reelected for his 2nd term. In Tennessee, we just heard Howard Baker, and his replacement in the Senate is Albert Gore Jr., the son of a senator. Albert Gore, the projected winner, a Democrat, defeating Republican State Senator Victor Ashe. In Maine, Republican incumbent William Cohen, reelected tonight to his 2nd term. He defeated the Democratic State House Majority Leader Elizabeth Mitchell. Cohen, the winner in Maine. In Kansas, Nancy Kassebaum, the daughter of Alf Landon, reelected to her 2nd term. Mrs. Kassebaum defeated James Mayer, a Kansas City banker. In New Jersey, the Democratic incumbent William Bradley, reelected to his 2nd term. He defeated the mayor of Montclair, Mary Masheri, who spent about $600,000 and moved 2 points in the polls. And finally, in Oklahoma, the Democratic incumbent David Boren, the former governor, reelected to his 2nd term, defeating the Republican William Crozier. Boren, the projected winner in Oklahoma. So let's take a rundown now of the other Senate races we've called, beginning with the great upset of the evening so far in Kentucky. The new winner, the new senator from Kentucky, Republican Mitch McConnell, defeating the Democratic incumbent Walter Huddleston. In Alabama, the projected winner, Democrat Howell Heflin, defeating Albert Lee Smith. In South Carolina, reelected to his 5th term, 81-year-old Strom Thurmond. In Georgia, reelected Sam Nunn. Sam Nunn, the Democrat. In Virginia, John Warner, Republican, reelected tonight, defeating Edith Harrison, the Democrat. And in Mississippi, the Republican incumbent Thad Cochran, defeating the former Democratic governor of Mississippi.
Connecticut, in the Northeast, in New England, the state of Connecticut, Ronald Reagan, the winner in Connecticut tonight. 8 electoral votes in Connecticut, according to our analysis of the votes that have been released, and of course the people that we talked to today as they left the voting place. Connecticut goes in the Reagan column. And down in the Southwest, which is solid Reagan territory, Oklahoma. Roger was just talking about the re-election of Senator Boren, but the state of Oklahoma goes to Ronald Reagan tonight, according to our projection. 8 electoral votes in Oklahoma. They all go to Ronald Reagan, so that too is a blue state on our map. Blue is the color of victory for Ronald Reagan tonight. 270 electoral votes needed for election in the eastern part of the United States for the U.S. Senate. Roger?
It sure has, Tom. It's the Massachusetts seat being vacated by Democrat Paul Tsongas, and tonight we have a projected winner, and it's John Kerry. He's the old Vietnam, well, not the old, but the young Vietnam veteran. He's the Democratic lieutenant governor of the state, and he has defeated, according to our projection.
John Kerry, in case you remember, was Secretary of State under Obama, and He was the 2004 Democratic nominee for president against George W. Bush when George W. Bush was running for his second term.
Objection, the Republican incumbent, Ray Shammy, who tied himself tightly to Ronald Reagan. And interestingly enough, one of the critical elements in that vote was the number of women votes that Lieutenant Governor Kerry received. And the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, Charles...
Polls, all the published polls, liars to lizards. Now, this race could have a very important impact on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee if Percy loses his bid tonight and Senator Jesse Helms of North Carolina wins his. Then Helms could replace Percy, and that, of course, is one of the reasons why this race is one of the most closely watched anywhere in the nation. From Percy headquarters in Chicago, I'm Mary Nissenson. Back to you, Roger, in New York.
And Mary, one more projection this evening in the Senate races in Delaware. The incumbent Democrat Joe Biden is the projected winner, and he's defeated the...
he looked like a goofball back
House
then.
Majority Leader in the Delaware legislature, John Burroughs. Joe Biden, the projected winner in Delaware. And Tom, if I said Ray Shammy was the incumbent, I didn't mean to. What I said was that Paul Tsongas was vacating Massachusetts. The seat is open, and the projected winner is John Kerry over Ray Shammy.
Okay, Roger, I wasn't going to put that mark against you at all.
Well, somebody said in my ear that I'd made this mistake.
Well, there are all kinds of voices in your ear on these kinds of nights. By the way, we have another state that we can now add to the Ronald Reagan column. That is the state of Delaware along the eastern seaboard. 3 electoral votes. It is important in other ways as well, and that is that since 1952, Delaware has always voted with the winner in American presidential elections. So Delaware, the color blue for Ronald Reagan tonight. We add those electoral votes to his total, and things are going swimmingly for him at this time. This is the Electoral College total as we now have it, 253, less than 20 away for President Reagan from the magic number of 200.
They had hopes for a number of those states. They really thought Pennsylvania might come. We don't know yet about New York. But the way things are going, you have to say that the polls are closed in New York, are they not?
Yeah. No, they're not closed until 9. Another 40 minutes, I think.
Well, then New York is still out there to be considered. But the way that is beginning to color in, it looks terribly good for the president.
Well, especially in Pennsylvania, a state with a lot of...
There's sun, there's energy. By AT&T, we're reaching out in new directions. And by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately? Now from the NBC News Election Center in New York, here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening once again. I'm here with John Chancellor and Roger Munn, and we're watching a really phenomenal development tonight as Ronald Reagan continues to roll through the country. So far, Walter Fritz Mondale has won only the District of Columbia. All those states that you see behind me that are colored blue are the states that we have projected Ronald Reagan the winner in tonight. The polls remain open, of course.
If you look carefully at that map, they had already called New York for Reagan at this time.
In the West and in the Pacific Northwest, that is Ronald Reagan territory, you still have the opportunity.
And you can see the timestamp being 9 o'clock, so they'd already called New York right after the polls closed.
To vote there, not just for the presidency, of course, but for the many state and local issues that are on the ballot, as well as the congressional and Senate races that are at stake there. But if this trend continues, Ronald Reagan will be one of the most popular presidents of modern times. You remember that Dwight Eisenhower won by an overwhelming margin when he ran in 1952, a 55-44 margin. 4 years ago, Ronald Reagan won by a similar margin, and this time he may exceed Eisenhower's second re-election total. Here's the Electoral College vote as we have it right now. 405 votes for Ronald Reagan. He has exceeded the Electoral College total that his pollster Dick Wirthlin said that he would get, 400. Fritz Mondale with only 3, so that makes it an Electoral College landslide alone. And here's what's going on with the national vote. 27% of the precincts have reported in so far. The Reagan margin now has dropped a wee bit. It's down from 22 points down to 18 points. It's still in the landslide proportions, but it has dropped 2 or 3 percentage points in the last hour or so as we count the national vote. We are keeping track of 13 governor's races tonight as well. We want to share some of those with you. Republicans have been doing well, but in the state of Arkansas, the Democrats. 38-year-old Bill Clinton elected to his 3rd term. Look at that boyish face, and he's already been in office 3 times in Arkansas. Elected once, then defeated, came back, and now he's been elected successfully to a 2nd term in Arkansas. But in Rhode Island, the state of Rhode Island, Edward DePrett, who is the mayor of Cranston, Rhode Island, and a Republican. That governor's office goes from a Democrat to a Republican this time. Joe Gary retiring in Rhode Island. And in Missouri, the Republicans hang on to the governor's chair out there. Kit Bond retiring. And races. More important, the balance of power in the House of Representatives in the second Reagan term. Philosophically, will it be more conservative, more liberal, more moderate? Roger's now prepared to answer those questions for all of us. Aren't you, Roger?
Well, I'll take a crack at it. NBC News.
From the NBC News election headquarters here in New York, we can now add another western state. Ronald Reagan's total, actually, it was his best state 4 years ago. He won 73% of the vote in Utah. It has 5 electoral votes. It's a very conservative state. And Utah tonight is colored blue on our NBC News election map. That goes into the Ronald Reagan column as we begin to move this map westward, and the blue wave moves with the map at the same time. Polls remain open in California and many of the western and Pacific Northwestern states. That means on the Electoral College total now, Ronald Reagan has 410 votes, Walter Mondale, Nicaragua, an invasion that has not yet occurred if it were ever to occur. Well, some news of the international sort tonight. We'll be back with more after this. This evening go along. So that's the national vote. Those 2 states that I talked about that we have not been able to make a call in yet because it's still too close for us to make the kind of projection that we would like to. Let us begin in the state of Massachusetts, if we can. Up in the northeastern part of the United States, show you the popular vote in Massachusetts tonight. Well, maybe there we can. 61% of the precincts reporting in. Nationality would help them as well. What happened in New York, Ronald Reagan carried 58% of the Catholics, Walter Mondale 42%. And Ronald Reagan carried 63% of the Italians in this state. Walter Mondale 37%. So there wasn't a big draw there. Geraldine Ferraro, it's a campaign that will linger in the memory of a lot of people for a long time, especially when she accepted the nomination in San Francisco, you recall, at the Democratic Convention there. A lot of women in that audience that night there were very moist-eyed, and a lot of women across the country were very taken with the idea that a woman could run for vice president. The Democrats had hoped against hope that there might be a kind of secret woman's vote that would be exercised today. Women would say to pollsters, yes, I'm going to vote for Ronald Reagan in the presence of their husband, and then go off and the privacy of the voting booth, they would cast the ballot for Walter Mondale and Geraldine Ferraro because, in fact, she was a woman running for vice president of the United States. At any rate, we'll be hearing more from Geraldine Ferraro. She had to give up her House seat. She was a popular and increasingly powerful member of the House of Representatives, but I think that there's a very good possibility that she'll be running for office once again, perhaps for the Senate from New York. At any event, we'll be back with more from election night 1984 after this.
Julian Bond. Tom?
Dennis Murphy and Julian 21. If it stays at that number, it still is a commanding, even landslide victory, but it may drop down a little bit. We'll have to watch this evening go along. So that's the national vote. Those two, looking at the calendar a little bit, that ship reportedly left the Black Sea around October 2nd, and it was around that same time, not too far away from that the Soviet Foreign Minister, Andrei Gromyko, that we want to project now for President Reagan. And they're dwindling down to a precious few opportunities for Walter Mondale at this time. The state of Rhode Island, which is one of the states the Democrats thought that they had a shot at. Rhode Island tonight we project for Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, the tiny state by the sea, Rhode Island for Ronald Reagan. It is a little corner of blue up there. Massachusetts still could go for Walter Mondale, of course. We'll be keeping our eye on that. Also, out in the Midwest, a state that Walter Mondale felt a real kinship with, but it's a state in which Ronald Dutch Reagan began to rise to fame as a broadcaster on station WHO. Iowa tonight, the projected winner, Ronald Reagan. 170 required. President Reagan is maybe able to double it. Well, he can't double that, obviously, but he's got 430 electoral votes at this time. Walter Mondale, 3. So it's a commanding, a landslide for President Reagan in the Electoral College vote, and if his popular vote holds, it and the 33 Walter Mondale holding on and hoping for Minnesota, Massachusetts.
Senate race, an incumbent chairman of the to be decided. Made close by the Reagan vote count of vote leading first industry.
Right. Looking what's going on in Massachusetts, Canada 49 are there. Is it white collar businesses that used to just right?
So part of the neighborhood.
Democrat.
Paused and raised the question about whether, in fact, that time hasn't gone by. Tonight, the people are making a judgment about that.
Well, he spent 2 years.
16 points over Mondale and Ferraro, a 16-point lead, 58-42. For a time, it was as high as 20-21. If it stays at that number, it still is a commanding, even landslide victory, but it may drop down a little bit. We'll have to watch this evening go along. So that's the national vote. Those two states that I talked about that we have not been able to make a call in yet because it's still too close for us to make the kind of projection that we would like to. Let us begin in the state of Massachusetts, if we can. Up in the northeastern part of the United States, show you the popular vote in Massachusetts. Presidential row, 11,000 Massachusetts strong sinks are in. This has been a very big night for the man that a lot of politicians refuse to take seriously throughout much of his career, and that is Ron. First really noticed by Republicans' loss of attention, 2 years presidency in earnest, even
finding that Illinois with House David Republican, Democrat, Republican, Massachusetts, return, re-elected David Boren, Clay fifth, Corner. Here's the list, Tom.
Queens, New York, where tonight we're in Manhattan, I'm told. We've just changed boroughs from Queens to Manhattan. Geraldine Ferraro, Democratic vice presidential candidate, the first woman to run for that office in a major party ticket.
Campaign ends. The race is over. This is not a moment for partisan statements. It is a moment to celebrate our democracy. That cause, our country's cause, is never finished. And I, for one, will...
Can you hear me? And Ronald Reagan carried 63% of the Italians in this state. Walter Mondale, 37%. So there wasn't a big draw there. Geraldine Ferraro, it's a campaign that will linger in the memory of a lot of people for a long time, especially when she accepted the nomination in San Francisco, you recall, at the Democratic Convention there. A lot of women in that audience that night there were very moist-eyed, and a lot of women across the country were very taken with the idea that a woman could run for vice president. The Democrat, Maureen Reagan.
All right, I'm going to play Reagan's victory speech a little while I do a search for some of the last calls.
Very successful advertising man in Southern California.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
That's the president's brother that you can see with the glasses in the background. Look at the hair in that family. I mean, he's older than the president.
I think that's just been arranged. Well, thank you all very much. It seems we did this 4 years ago, and let me just say, well, you know, good habits are hard to break. Just a short time ago, Walter Mondale phoned me, and to, no, he concede. No, and he told me that the people had made their decision, and therefore we were all Americans. We'd go forward together. But Nancy and I would like to express
of American politics, the character in Dallas who's always coming up on the short end of a deal as well. We'll be back with more on election night, 1984, but that's where the election stands at this time. We're back. Roger, you think there's any chance at all that George Bush could ever win the Republican nomination for president in 4 years?
Oh, yeah, there's a chance. I just recalling what we've heard this evening, I think probably the most devastating comment I've heard in public was uttered by Lynn Knopfsinger tonight when Emory King was interviewing him, and he asked Mr. Knopfsinger, you think George Bush helped himself by the way he campaigned this year? And Knopfsinger, yeah, I think he helped himself a little. Yeah.
I think the conservative wing of the party is going to be just so determined to make sure that he doesn't get that nomination, and they still control the process in the GOP.
Well, they wrote the platform. They control this convention. They'll control the next convention. Right. And they're, as you say, Tom, they are very, very suspicious that he is a conservative in sheep's clothing. Yeah. And I must say that George Bush does sometimes damages his own image. Jim Dickinson of the Washington Post tells the story about George Bush being asked once why he wore those Brooks Brothers suits. Didn't they give him a preppy image? And Bush said, well, for one thing, he said, I don't think they give me a preppy image. He said, the other thing, he says, they're not from Brooks Brothers. He said, they're from J. Press, right, one of the leading preppy suppliers in the United States. I think he's fun to campaign with and fun to watch, but I think he makes at least his share of mistakes when he's out on campaign.
We're going to project another state for guess who?
We have very few left.
Guess who? Ronald Reagan wins the state of Hawaii tonight. Hawaii is one of those states that goes Democratic generally, but this time we are projecting John Chancellor in Hawaii right there on your screen. There is the state of Hawaii, the string of islands. Color them blue tonight for Ronald Reagan. The last couple of elections, they've gone for the Democrats, but not this time. And the Reagan total continues to roll on. That's the Electoral College total now, 522 to just 3 for Walter Mondale. The District of Columbia, not a state of... We can now, I am told that we can, in fact, project Walter Mondale, the winner of the state of Minnesota. That is his home state.
Consolation prize.
Single state that he will win tonight. It has 10 electoral votes. It is his home and his headquarters. It is the taproot of his whole political philosophy. Minnesota, colored red tonight. For Walter Mondale, he can claim his pride in his native state and in his neighbors and the people who sent him to Washington as a senator and elected him attorney general as well. And from that, he can claim. To date on something in Kentucky, we were talking about how close that race is, even though we have projected Mitch McConnell, the new winner of the Senate down there. I'm told by our wizards, John Ellis and Roy Wetzel tonight, that it is impossible.
I'm trying to find
for
two more
Senator
calls. I
Huddleston
found one of
to
them.
make up the few thousand votes in the precincts that are left. So
the one that got him to 525, by the way.
We're now able to project in the state of Alaska, Ronald Reagan, the winner of Alaska's 3 electoral votes tonight as he continues this enormous landslide, perhaps sweeping all 50 states before the night is out. Only the state of Minnesota, as you can see, outstanding on our map tonight. All those other states colored blue for Ronald Reagan tonight. And in Minnesota, we still cannot make a projection. That means in the electoral vote that Ronald Reagan now has amassed 520. Paul Laxalt, who is the general chairman of his campaign. 434 electoral votes for the president. It's 3 for Walter. Paused and raised the question about whether, in fact, that time hasn't gone by. Tonight, the people are making a judgment about that.
I'm going to try and find the call for California just because it's just so fascinating to watch, but I don't think it's in this compilation. I do have a few more videos to look through. So it might be here, actually. Let me look.
And President Reagan wrapping up the campaign in his home state of California. He'd like to hear "Hail to the Chief" for another 4 years.
Decision 84, election preview with Tom Brokaw.
We want to show you.
So this was the night before the election, I think, or the evening right before they closed the first polls. They kind of did polling in all of the states, And these aren't state calls. This is just the way they're expecting states to go beforehand. Everybody knew Reagan was going to win going into the election. The question was how much.
About what is going on in this big NBC News map that we have behind us here. There have been a lot of polls in this campaign. A lot of people think that there have been too many polls. Anyway, the NBC News election unit has been looking at all of those polls, talking to experts in both parties and all of the states, and it has come up with a snapshot of where the country seems to be on this election eve. Seems to be. The only sure bet for Mondale tonight seems to be the District of Columbia, so we'll color that red in our big NBC News election map. Red will be Walter Mondale's color tomorrow night. And these are the states that seem to be strong for Ronald Reagan or leaning his way, so they're colored blue on the map. Now, the rest of the states that are figured to be contestable, that is up for grabs or where Mondale has a chance.
Notice some notes about this map. Obviously, this was a different era, but New York was expected to go for Reagan the night before, based on pollsters. But Pennsylvania, they weren't sure because Mondale poured a lot of money in there. 1984, if you look at the way the states voted, how heavily blue or how heavily red, how heavily Democrat or how heavily Republican. 1984 is odd because it was the last election where New York actually voted more Republican than Pennsylvania. If you don't believe me, look it up. I think he won New York by double digits, but he only won Pennsylvania by single digits. But that's just a little interesting tidbit about 1984. It's because Walter Mondale did really well because Reagan didn't do too well in western Pennsylvania around Pittsburgh. He lost a lot of ground there compared to his election in 1980. But New York, he got because Ronald Reagan did extremely well in the suburbs. So the reason he won New York by a big margin that year is he just about everybody in like Westchester County and Long Island voted for like New York. And by Long Island, I mean Nassau and Suffolk County.
You can see those there, Iowa, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, places like Maryland. As I say, that's a rough consensus.
Too close to call. Maryland,
and here is a little bit of ABC's ABC News' coverage.
David, that's it. I apologize.
No, I think that's a national election.
That's the national picture at 22 minutes past the hour.
States on the mainland of the U.S., 48 states, left white because we haven't been able to project them yet because they're still voting.
He is our president, and we honor him tonight. Again tonight, the American people.
All right. Let me see if I can find... I'll probably get copyright struck if I play NBC News' clip, but it might be on this one.
Looking away at them for the last several months now, trying to find out what, in fact, that they do have in mind. Do you expect that we'll have a wholesale change of personnel? You said earlier tonight that the president's comfortable with the folks he has around him, but do you think that, for example, in the cabinet, that Donovan can survive at labor? Ronald Dutch Reagan began to rise to fame as a broadcaster on station WHO. Iowa tonight, the projected winner, Ronald Reagan in Iowa. Also in Idaho, his second best state 4 years ago, tonight, projected winner in Idaho with its 4 electoral votes is President Reagan. So he begins to add to his total. Massachusetts still outstanding, and Minnesota up there, a little white island where Walter Mondale is tonight. Let's take a look at the Electoral College vote. 270 required. President Reagan is maybe able to double the Blake.
Anyway, I think that's I think y'all get the point. So we'll go ahead and let's look at the map. This was the final result. And as you can see, it was a Reagan landslide. I mean, it was very similar to the one Richard Nixon won against George McGovern back in 1972. This was just 12 years later. Reagan won every state except for Minnesota, which was Walter Mondale's home state. 525 electoral votes. that is the record for total gross number of electoral votes won. As far as the percentage of electoral votes won in modern electoral history, I think FDR in 1936 won a slightly higher percentage, even though he only won 523 electoral votes, because Alaska and Hawaii had not become states yet. So, and DC hadn't been awarded 3 electoral votes yet due to a constitutional amendment. So there are fewer electoral votes up for grabs. I think back then you only needed 266 or 267 to win. But yeah, this was an electoral landslide. It was almost the same popular vote landslide as 1972. 1972 was the last election where any candidate from either party won more than 60% of the popular vote. 60. Nixon got about 61%. Reagan in this election got about 59%, I think. He didn't do quite as well with the popular vote as Nixon did, but with the electoral vote and the coattails he had, this was in almost every other way as big, if not slightly bigger of a landslide than what Nixon had in 1972. So, I mean, we're not going to have elections like this anymore, at least anytime soon. Although I've said in previous streams, I do think landslides are going to become more popular again relative to close elections, because American history, political history, and political cycles tend to go in different eras. So you'll have an era where you have a lot of close elections more than decisive or landslide elections. And then they'll be followed by eras that have more decisive elections than close elections. We had such an era of mostly landslides between 1952 and about really 2000, I would say. In fact, between 1952 and 1988, every time a Republican won the presidency, it was in a landslide. And the one exception was 1968. Nixon won in a squeaker against Hubert Humphrey. But Democrats during that whole term, they typically won in close elections. Think Kennedy in 1960 and Jimmy Carter in 1976. The one exception for that rule was LBJ in 1964. He won a landslide of like 62% of the popular vote and almost 500 electoral votes. So, but then from 2000 to really, except for 2008, which I would call decisive, a decisive Obama victory, every presidential election has been decided by, I think, less than 5 points in the popular vote, and the electoral vote margin. No candidate has won more than 350 electoral votes, I think, except maybe Obama in 2008. I think he won 360 or somewhere around there. But every election has been relatively close, decided by only like 2 or 3 states. So, but we'll see what happens. I am going to continue this series. So the next one in the series, and I don't know when it'll be, it could be Thursday, it could be like 2 weeks from now for all I know, but we will cover 1988, George H.W. Bush versus Michael Dukakis. So stay tuned for that whenever I announce it. And then there's going to be a greater variety of content coming your way as well, too. So in between now and then, like I said, I'm going to try and get more shorts done, other things going on. But I got a lot going on right now. So I want to thank all of you for joining me on this stream. There are actually quite a few people here. I think we got up to about like 10 different viewers on YouTube. So these seem to be my most popular type of streams. So maybe it's because I'm just like history autist or a political map autist. So, but yeah, we're gonna do 1988 pretty soon, which was a borderline landslide, but definitely a decisive victory. Just a little preview: 1988 was the last election where any candidate of either party, Republican or Democrat, won more than 400 electoral votes. And so that'll give you a little preview, if unless you just want to cheat and look ahead of time. So, but anyway, that's going to do it for now. Thank you all for joining, and have a great night and a great rest of your week.